The male is not aware that his psychological issues, his stress, his depression, and everything is a result of patriarchal philosophy. Patriarchal philosophy is an anti-natural philosophy. It goes against the laws of nature. And males, by nature, submit to women. They are programmed to follow or trail behind women. The haggle, right? Because their desire is to pass their genes along. Sex. And the woman has a sexual power or attractive power that pulls the male along, right? That's the natural order of things. The woman being in front and the male being behind her, pursuing her. That's the way the shit go. But patriarchy flipped nature and placed the male in front of the female and told him that he was the head of the household and told him that he was the leader. Now, this has done a few things by flipping nature on top of its head, okay? The male does not have a purpose by nature. By nature, the male does not have purpose or vision. His ultimate goal is sex. That's the highest goal of the male. A man has to be developed and has to intentionally create something above sex to work for. This is a choice that the male has to make. Okay? The majority of males will not make this choice. By nature, the highest aspiration of the male is sex. Okay? So when patriarchy flipped nature on top of his head, he put the male whose highest aspiration is sex and told him that the world was his and that he was the natural leader. And then they constructed a world that gave the male all of the power, right? But the male works by a reward system in his brain. He has to earn everything that he gets. But patriarchy didn't make the male earn anything. Patriarchal philosophy gave the male everything. It gave the male women by stripping women of their rights to provide for themselves and forcing women to depend on males. What did this do? This was a form of conditioning that made the male believe in a false reality, because the false reality was upheld by laws, law enforcement, and religious philosophy that was created by males. So what it did is it stroked the ego of a male and put the male in a delusional state that appeared to be real only through law and law enforcement. What has occurred, okay, now in the world is the artificial controls, law and law enforcement have been removed. The male has been told, and he bought into the lie, that he was better than the woman, that that woman couldn't do this, that, and the other, and that women are not as logical. The male bought into these lies, which created a delusional world for him to live in. Well, what happens when your core beliefs are faced with reality? There is what you call cognitive dissonance that is created. Cognitive dissonance is when your core beliefs are now challenged or conflicting with a new set of information or reality, and you can't accept the reality. When you experience cognitive dissonance, a person gets angry. I need y'all to understand this. Cognitive dissonance creates anger and rage. Because what has happened is the reality, without laws and law enforcement, nature is going back in its actual direction where women are operating in their nature to resist males. They couldn't resist males because of laws at one point, but those laws are no longer there. So everything that men have been told about women, they are starting to see it's not true, because women are out achieving men. They are doing the things that men thought only that males could do, now that women are not inhibited by laws. This is creating cognitive dissonance in the male, because he's still living in that delusional world that was upheld by artificial laws. And so now it is creating a level of anger in him because of cognitive dissonance that was created by patriarchy. Now, why is this important? Because you have to know the psychological makeup of the male.
The Y chromosome is slowly disappearing, and honestly, that makes sense. I've already been thinking that the Y chromosome is a defect because an X and an X for a female makes sense and it appears to be stable, but an X and a Y appears that one of the chromosomes literally like has a leg broken off of it, which would be the Y chromosome. So the Y chromosome is literally slowly disappearing. And genuinely, I kind of feel like that's the universe like just naturally course correcting itself. We've lived in this patriarchal system for too long, and I feel like it's starting to lean towards a matriarchy for the survival of this planet, literally. Like, I feel like it's down to this planet's survival being the reason why the Y chromosome is slowly disappearing, and in 11 million years, it could completely vanish. And that just makes sense to me. It truly does. I feel like X and X actually look equal. And it doesn't look like, you know, something's wrong with that. X and a Y, that doesn't feel as balanced, you know? So I just feel like maybe nature is returning to the natural order of things because we've lived in this man-made patriarchal structure for so long that the universe is basically trying to correct itself and lead us towards a matriarchy. Lead us to women actually being the people in power within this world. I feel like that's where the natural power actually is. And the current power dynamic is unbalanced. And it's like not the natural way that things occur if, you know, we weren't inside of this patriarchal system. So that's why I feel like it's kind of, you know, making sense as to why the Y chromosome would be disappearing slowly. Like, that just makes sense to me.
This news has been making headlines. The Y chromosome is disappearing. The logic being that 166 million years ago, the X chromosome and the Y chromosome used to be the same size. But since then, the Y chromosome has lost a significant number of active genes, shrinking from 900 to 55 genes. So if you follow the logic to the end, it implies that in the next couple million years, men will go extinct. But that's not true, nor is it the question that we should be actually asking. What we should be focusing on is why the Y chromosome is seemingly disappearing. Most chromosomes come in pairs in case of any harmful mutations. It's like nature's backup system. But alas, the Y chromosome does not. It is a single Pringle. As a result, this sadly means that the Y chromosome cannot participate in this genetic swap meet. Instead, it continues to accumulate these mutations until the genes basically go kaput and disappear completely. It's actually not that wild to state that the Y chromosome might end up disappearing forever, especially since it's already happened. The Amami spiny rats don't have a Y chromosome. but they used to 2 million years ago. Turns out that the male rats had a duplication of SOX9 on their chromosome 3. And SOX9 happens to be a key gene in the SRY region that signals to the embryo to grow testes, meaning it ultimately has the same effect as the Y chromosome. With two genes doing the same job, there was a redundancy. So over time, the Y chromosome disappeared entirely, making chromosome 3 effectively the new Y chromosome. So even if the Y chromosome decides to ghost us, men won't suddenly vanish. The Y chromosome might be downsizing, but your manhood is not. That sounds way worse said out loud than it did on paper. You know what I mean.
When you understand the genetics of men, this picture is always going to answer the question as to why men are so selfish. Being born as a man is like being born with a disability, except it's a very small, visible disability where you can get through your day-to-day life fine for the most part, but you don't want to let everybody know that you have a disability. But there are little small ways that you will have to be able to gain assistance in life with your disability. So in order to combat that, you have to find little ways to manipulate people to help you with your disability without disclosing that you have a disability. That way you can get and hit the milestones in life as if you don't have that disability. That way you never have to admit the fact that you have a disability. Men have no choice but to be selfish because they are not born with all of the information and everything that they need to be able to advance in life easily like women are. We got 2 X chromosomes. They're full, they're robust, they're full of genetic information. The men have a Y chromosome. It's missing an entire fucking leg. So they are missing a piece of very valuable genetic information, and then they don't have as much variation in that Y chromosome to begin with. Men must be selfish for their own survival. The issue is that they don't want to admit that they are so weak and that they very much are born with a genetic mutation that they would need our help. Because if you're the most logical, if you're the strongest, if you're the smartest out of both genders, you would not require a woman to help build for you or build with you. You would not require the empathy and the emotional labor of a woman. You would not require the domestic labor of a woman. This is why men are constantly getting upset over the fact that women call themselves independent women. Historically, women did not have the freedom to be able to practice their independence. But what I find so funny is that women, even though technically we are deemed as the weaker gender, the less intelligent gender, the illogical gender, the emotional gender, we're able to say that we're independent, yet you constantly hear men saying, I need a woman, I need a wife, I need someone to build with me, I need someone to take a chance on me. Why are the men not saying that they're the independent ones when they're claiming that they have all the equipment needed to be able to do everything that they need alone? A strong person, a smart person, a logical person does not need the assistance of another person to be able to get far in life. And it's because they know that being born as a man, they have a disability, they have a mutation, they have something that makes it harder for them to be able to advance in life without the help of another person. And the reason why they're never going to admit this is because they don't want women to gatekeep themselves. They don't want women to say, I'm not going to let you siphon my energy. I'm not going to let you spike up my cortisol where I'm over here gaining 40 pounds. My hair is thinning. My hair is turning gray. I'm gradually getting more wrinkles. I'm acquiring autoimmune diseases. I'm miserable. I'm depressed. I have all of these mental health conditions. Because in most cases, that is how your life is going to look when you have yourself be adjacent to men, because you are adjacent to a person that has a fucking disability.
The Y chromosome is a degenerate X, and it don't have nearly the amount of genes that an X chromosome has. The Y chromosome is missing a lot of genes, and the male is a result of an XY combination. You get the male from that. And the male biologically is inferior genetically to the female. He is more susceptible in the womb. He is less capable of communication. He's less capable of controlling impulse. He's less capable of emotional intelligence. He is really deficient all around the board. The male, he fights an internal battle on the day-to-day basis. Here's a comment left to me from a lady on the video where I described how misandrous mentality is created in men. Please, Queen, can you speak about relationships between boys and mothers? I have 2 sons. I'm having trouble believing this about them, but not other men. That is of no surprise to me, because when you birth boys, there is a cord that is created and connected to women and their sons that psychologically manipulate women into catering to their sons, creating a codependent cord where they don't see their sons the same way they see other males. This cord connecting causes women to self-sacrifice to ensure male survival, which negatively impacts male development. When you birth boys, male fetuses leave Y chromosomal DNA scattered across the female brain in multiple regions. Bearing sons can alter your mind. Male microchimerism in the human female brain. There's a clip going around from the Real Life Street Stars episode when they asked me if I had sons, how would I raise them? That women need to cut the cord around 6 or 7 years old. And a lot of people were up in arms, but they're up in arms because they have no knowledge of male development. It's the same women who coddle their sons and then complain about the codependent nature or behavior of someone else's son that they're trying to date, while they're raising their own sons the same exact way. When you look out into the world, it is evident that women do not know how to raise male children. So the opinions of a woman about how to raise male children when they don't do any study and they are responding to the effects of male DNA scattered across their brain, I don't listen to them, and their opinions are worthless to me, just as their opinions are worthless to the males whom they try to raise. Fragility of the male is just so prevalent because the studies show that male children have more of an attachment to their mother than girl children. So we understand that male children leave Y chromosomal DNA on the female's brain, which has an impact on their relationship. But this codependent cord that is connected, the son-mother relationship, it's so strong that anything negative that goes on with the mother can impact that child negatively. So postpartum depression is known to impact the male child long after the depression is gone for many years. It's like you're walking a very, very tight line. Either you do it all right or you make one mistake and you can just send this male child into a complete whirlwind.
Men sleep better next to women and like their wives or their lovers than women. Like women sleep better without.
And like 90% of men will be like, my wife's my best friend, and the wife will be like,
I saw that too.
Kelly and Ray are my best friends.
Yeah.
One thing about getting married, you got to get used to not being able to do regular shit without your fucking partner. Example, it's early as fuck in the morning. Wife woke up early as shit. I'm like, why you up so early? She like, I can't sleep. So she leaving the room saying she don't want to wake me up. She's like, get your rest, go back to sleep. I'm like, gladly. I can't sleep without her ever in life. So now I'm just a nigga that's up early too. Now I'm finna get out of bed and go see what she got going on, because I miss her, bro. My body don't know how to sleep without her being in this vicinity, dog. It's too goddamn early for this shit. Hey, baby. You know I can't sleep without you, man.
Oh, I can sit next to you. I just don't want to bother you.
Oh.
Oh, my big baby.
Ways that actually threaten the other sex's genetic legacy.
Ways that actually threaten the other sex's genetic legacy. Now, patriarchy has programmed women to take on the concerns of the male and help the male survive. Surviving is not the concern of the woman. I'm gonna show you. We're gonna keep going.
For males, it's all about quantity.
For male, it's all about quantity.
Sperm are easy to mass produce, and most males spend little time or energy parenting. But the pickier females are, the tougher it is for the average male to make babies.
The pickier the females are, the tougher it is for the average male to make babies. The true nature of this planet was to have women in control. So women made the decision who was going to reproduce and who wouldn't, when kids was coming here and when they weren't. But they took that power away from you and allowed the male to trample you. It's too many people on the planet, so the last thing women need to be concerned about is, what about the human race though? There's too many people here because patriarchy made it that way. That's the reason why the world is collapsing. And that's the reason why they got a depopulation plan now, because it's too many people here because they put the male in control who ain't got no governor on his behavior. It is not normal for a woman to be pregnant for 13 years straight. It is not normal. The last thing women need to be concerned about is, what about the human race? It's enough motherfuckers here already.
So males have evolved ways to limit females' discretion.
Males have evolved ways to limit female discretion. One of those ways was religion. Christianity, Judaism, Islam. Right? Turning the tables of nature using patriarchy and allowing these motherfuckers to run rampant.
In some species, males take their mates through brute force.
Taking their mates through brute force, raping them. This is the male nature. This is the male nature. The last thing women need to be concerned about is male nature. Women need to be concerned about protecting themselves from male nature in all species.
While males in other species take the slightly less unsavory approach of obsessively following their mates around to keep other suitors away.
Stalking. Following them. This is men being able to pass their genes along and keep knocking. That's their concern. It's not a woman's concern, because women limit the number of people that are born on the planet, keeping the planet in homeostasis at its optimal range. Women would have never allowed themselves to get pregnant and populate this planet like that. No woman, if they had control, would sit up here and be pregnant with 9 fucking kids. 9, 13, 16 kids. This is what men was doing to women. It's too many people on the planet because of this.
All of the research shows the following. Men need and benefit from relationships much more than women.
It looks like men are showing up and saying the quiet parts out loud today, or maybe I'm just seeing these clips today. And I have, as a woman, as a mental health professional, obviously I have beef with Scott and his posturing and how vocal he is about topics that he doesn't have any training in. And so I'm a licensed mental health professional. I also have a degree in sociology, and this is what I do every day, all day. And Scott is a professor, and he's telling the truth. So he has the capacity to evaluate and interpret statistical data, and he is accurate. Data based on sociological studies has proven and demonstrated over many decades that marriage calms men down. Marriage stabilizes men's behavior. I said this on this platform about 4 years ago. When I tell you that men were threatening to call my licensing board and were saying that I was disparaging men, I was putting them down, when I'm only telling you what the data tells us. Now, when Scott says it, it's okay and he gets claps. But when I said it, right, it's cool when he say it, but when I say it, they wanted to report my license. Marriage gives men structure It gives them boundaries. Without it, they go off the rails, and the data proves it to be so. They will burn down society. Any society where there are lots of men who are single and who do not have children, there's also high rates of violence and high rates of drug and alcohol abuse, exactly what he's talking about. So instead of making women responsible for saving our society by partnering with men who are not partner material, the question, Scott, should be, what are you going to do to create men who are autonomous, mature adults, able to make pro-social behaviors on their own, able to be a part of a society in a healthy, functioning way without being under the supervision of women? This is your task. Don't talk to women about us being in relationships. You, Scott, get all these male scholars together and y'all figure out the problem of men's violence and men's acting out behavior and create a solution for men and leave us out of it.
When women don't have a relationship, they pour that energy into their friends and their work. When a man doesn't have a relationship, he pours it into conspiracy theory, porn, and misogyny. Men need relationships much more than women. So this
is why patriarchy requires mandatory heterosexual marriage to force women to be the shock absorbers for male dysfunction inside the home to spare the larger community and society from having to deal with it. Men abandon boys emotionally and in terms of mentorship and social leadership because such investments do not yield individual pay, praise, or pleasure. So through marriage, women are expected to finish raising the man, right? That forces her to coercively co-regulate his nervous system, his emotions, or to at least be the target for his aggression so that he keeps it at home. Terrorize her to soothe him so we don't have to deal with it. And Scott G says it right there. Women productively invest their energies into community and self-development when they are not forced to be the shock absorbers for male dysfunction. And that's why we're seeing so much woman bashing right now. From that New York Times article saying, did women ruin the workplace? To all the right-wing hysteria about how young women voted for Mayor Mondami in New York City by overwhelming margins. It's a big problem for supremacy systems when women refuse to be the scapegoat and fuel for patriarchal dysfunction. Later in their conversation, Scott G is like, we should do universal childcare support. Like, that is so important. That's going to help couples and people get married more. And it's not about the kids. Like, I am very much pro universal childcare support, but Scott G wants it because he's saying we need to get women to be shock absorbing wives again. We can't get men to participate in their households or be good partners or parent their own children. But maybe if we got them some daycare, then maybe women will come back to the table and, you know, pick up the slack and do something with these men. And it's all BS.
But see, the funny thing now, women still give birth. Women still are goddesses every day. Women still nurture, give birth, teach, raise every day. We're mothers. So our reflection is still literally the same. Because the old, look, people might call us this and that, but the oldest, they say the oldest profession, I don't know if it's true or not, but they say the oldest profession is the same thing people call us to this day. Because, so, and even in ancient times, women were worshipped no matter what. Because we bring life to the planet or deliver it. So think of us as Amazon delivery trucks versus the postal service. Which one y'all go believe in is coming to the house first? Which one y'all are more excited to see? Okay, sprinkle, sprinkle.
Women are so good at...
Women have a neurological advantage over men. Women have all the abilities to perform and do things in society that they actually just want to be lazy and let men do, right? Dr. Amen, he did 40,000 brain scans between males and females and let you know that it's a significant difference between male and female brains, and that women's prefrontal cortex is a lot more active, which means that they have better executive functioning. They have the ability to multitask. They have better impulse control, all this stuff. And they're designed to be very selective in their relationships.
While boys are physically stronger, they're mentally and emotionally and neurologically much weaker. And we don't want to even acknowledge that. Boys are weaker.
More fragile, perhaps. Yeah, more tenuous.
Шагом, марш! Левый, левый. Раз, два, три. Левый, левый. Олег, подстраивайся, не подстраивайся, нога. Левый, левый. Раз, два, три. Левый, левый. Раз, два, три. Левый, девчонки, умницы. Левый.
Imagine this, 10 boys, all from the ages of 11 and 12, were put into a house with no adult supervision for 5 days. And if you heard me say that and thought to yourself, that sounds like a total Lord of the Flies situation, you're not wrong, because it did not take long for them to completely descend into chaos, completely desecrating the entire house. They freaking drew on the walls, they would flip furniture, they were just trashing everything. I think one of the funniest things about this experiment was they were actually given cooking lessons so that they would know how to prepare food for themselves, but obviously, naturally, I mean, come on, guys, they're 10, 11-year-old boys. They just had junk food the entire time. Cereal, soda. There was one attempt to cook food and then they just completely went back to cereal. But I think the saddest thing is, when this first started, it was all fun and games. They're having a good time, staying up late, but it very quickly turned into them splitting up into different factions, different gangs. They would fight. They even tied a kid up to a chair, which, yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense. Lord of the freaking Flies. But what's interesting about this whole thing is just how quickly their social structure that they developed just completely fell apart. What started out as excitement turned into isolation, depression. One boy even described the experiment as living in total hell. So what does this experiment tell us? Well, obviously, this is proof that boys, especially at this age, are more impulsive. They struggle with self-control. Their prefrontal cortex, which handles decision-making, isn't fully developed, and it develops later than girls at a similar age. But if you read commentaries about this experiment, people also say that this shows you how society treats little boys different than little girls. There's a lot less responsibility. There's a lot less accountability for their actions. They feel like they can get away with it because they get away with it. But it's insane. It's just insane to see how they freaking trashed this house. Obviously, nobody made a single attempt to clean anything. But my question to you is, if you put a group of 20-year-olds together, does this look any different? Because I've seen some of the frat houses at these colleges and But I'm about to post a part 2 because they did the same thing with girls, and let me tell you, the results are exactly the same. So 10 boys were left alone in a house with no parental supervision for 10 days. That was in the previous video. Now we're going to talk about when they did the same thing with 10 girls. If you saw the previous video, the boys descended into chaos relatively quickly. So you might say to yourself, oh, we can expect the same thing with these girls. No. From the start, the girls organized themselves. They made a freaking chore chart. Took turns cooking, cleaning, meals were planned. They didn't just survive off the snacks like the boys did. They really created this team. Now, they did play with the house a little bit. They did painting, but instead of like a destructive type of painting, they were doing murals. They were painting flowers. They tried to add to the beauty. What's really cool is that they were all there and emotionally supported each other. The boys' situation turned into a real Lord of the Flies situation. They had rival gangs. They were attacking each other. The girls were emotionally there. For example, when one of the girls became really sad, they all came together and they made this group beauty salon and had this beauty salon day. They would also curate activities. They would do little show and tell things, talent shows. All in all, it's a completely different experience than what the boys displayed. So why is this? Well, obviously with younger girls, their prefrontal cortex at the age of 10 or 11 is more developed than the boys. That's the part of your brain that controls decision making. But an argument can also be made about social conditioning, because when it comes to girls, generally they take on more responsibility and more is expected of them at younger ages. They grow up faster because they're expected to. My question is, do you think it is brain development? Do you think it's societal norms? or a combination of both. One thing is for sure, these girls showed cooperation, empathy, planning, like they survived very well in this house, and they even cleaned up before they left. Stark contrast to the boys, which honestly I think if the experiment would have gone 6 or 7 days, some of them wouldn't have made it. Really, I just want to get some of these girls in our Congress, because I'm pretty sure if you put 5 of our Congress people in a house for 5 days, it would also descend into chaos.
They are handicapped by nature. And what you're looking for don't exist. Very few. They are practically anomalies. Girls have better literary skills and are more aware of and explicit about their feelings, while boys tend to clam up, especially when their emotions are high, and just feel uncomfortable and awkward without knowing why. The male in his own body don't even know how he feels. But y'all want these dudes to communicate and tap into your feelings and communicate theirs, and they have a deficit that prevents them from even explaining how they feel because they don't know how they feel in their own damn body. The much studied defect, alexithymia, lack of an emotional vocabulary. The much studied defect, alexithymia, lack of an emotional vocabulary, is much commoner in boys. Alexithymia is associated with deficits in interhemispheric transfer across the brain. Even though almost all of the most powerful positions in politics and business are still occupied by relatively few men, recent social changes in post-industrial societies do not favor the majority. But in the rest of the world, men retain social advantages. These social advantages are a wheelchair ramp for males to compensate for their biological retardation.
Done a number on it.
Can you take the baby?
What do you mean?
He was literally reaching out for his daughter. Then last minute, he decided to change his mind and take his son instead. I like to call this weaponized incompetence. Basically, when your husband decides to do what you said, what you asked him to do, but instead of actually doing it the right way or how he's supposed to, he purposely does it the wrong way. Like prom example right here. Both of the women looked at each other and basically said with their eyes, why the heck would he do this? This doesn't make any sense. And yes, it doesn't make any sense. He's playing a mind game with her. That's all it is. He's playing games with her. And women think that men that act like this are stupid, but they're not. They're not stupid. They're not dumb. They know exactly what they're doing. But when the woman has finally had enough and she wants a divorce, the man is so shocked. He's so surprised that she no longer wants to deal with basically a big toddler.
I don't know if anybody else has seen this video, but I think we can all agree that this is a form of weaponized incompetence, right? This woman asked her husband to hang a wreath outside, and he did. But he did so in a haphazard way, and I think the average person would assume that he knows how to hang a wreath, or at least has seen a wreath in another house and knows this probably isn't the right place for it to go.
And then you open your lunchbox. A Diet Coke. And $20. And one hard bullet. Or oiled it all. Diet Dr. Pepper.
So by now we've probably all seen the video of the woman who went viral because her husband packed dog food in her lunch. But as you see, she's not alone. There are a lot of women whose men are playing in their faces. But my whole thing is how you do one thing is how you do everything. Because you could never convince me that the kind of men that pack lunches like this are the kind of men that go all out for her birthday, for their anniversary. That these are the kind of men that put something in their wives' stockings. No thought, no effort, no consideration. These are going to be the same men that are going to say that it came out of nowhere. But this is where it came from. It would stem from incident after incident, year after year of not being considered, not being treated the way that they treat you. And this is where it comes from. And for the women that laugh it off, I think they laugh to keep from crying. Because there's nothing funny about you simply needing a lunch and you getting a canned soda and a $20 bill. Like, you still got to get your own lunch. There's nothing funny about you getting a raw egg when you're hungry. Or you getting dog food and cookies. You could ignore it, you could laugh it off, but they're showing you how they feel about you.
On the backs of other people.
That's it. That's it. Right? Because if the male don't have a purpose, if a higher level male does not give him a purpose, he will be purposeless. And so this is what even Jordan Peterson said, that the male has to have responsibility. Because if he doesn't, he'll become Peter Pan, right? And so this is why the government took two aspects from female nature, which is providing and protecting, and gave that responsibility to the male, which is not his true nature. They created the nuclear family to assuage the male and gave him that responsibility for looking after the family, but the male don't really want that responsibility, which is the reason why he leave his family, because it get too hard and he tired. It's not in his nature to even have a fucking family unless he earn it.
Men have to figure out what they have to do. And if they have nothing worth living for, then they stay Peter Pan. And why the hell not? Because the alternative to valued responsibility is impulsive, low-class pleasure. And you saw that in the Pinocchio story, right? That's Pleasure Island. It's like, well, why lift a load if there's nothing in it for you? This is the Peter Pan story, roughly speaking. Peter Pan is this magical boy, and he's the boy that won't grow up. And he's magical. Well, that's because children are magical. They can be anything. They're nothing but potential. And Peter Pan doesn't want to give that up. Why? Well, he's got some adults around him, but the main adult is Captain Hook. Well, who the hell wants to grow up to be Captain Hook? First of all, you've got a hook. Second, you're a tyrant. And third, you're chased by the dragon of chaos with a clock in its stomach, right? The crocodile. It's already got a piece of you. Well, that's what happens when you get older. Time has already got a piece of you. And eventually, it's got a taste for you. And eventually, it's going to eat you. And so Hook is so traumatized by that he can't help but be a tyrant. And then Peter Pan looks at traumatized Hook and says, well, no, I'm not sacrificing my childhood for that. So that's fine, except he ends up king of the Lost Boys. In Neverland, well, Neverland doesn't exist, and who the hell wants to be king of the Lost Boys? And he also sacrifices the possibility that he'll have a real relationship with a woman, right? You have to sacrifice the pluripotentiality of childhood for the actuality of a frame. And the question is, well, why would you do that? Well, one reason is it happens to you whether you do it or not. You can either choose your damn limitation, or you can let it take you unaware when you're 30, or even worse, when you're 40. And then that is not a happy day. And I see people like this, and I think it's more and more common in our culture because people can put off maturity without suffering an immediate penalty. But all that happens is the penalty accrues, and then when it finally hits, it just wallops you, because when you're 25, you can be an idiot. It's no problem. Even when you're out in a job search, it's like, well, you don't have any experience and you're kind of clueless. It's, yeah, you're young, it's no problem. That's what young people are like, but they're full of potential. Okay, well, now you're the same person at 30. It's like people aren't so thrilled about you at that point. It's like, what the hell have you been doing for the last 10 years? Well, I'm just as clueless as I was when I was 22. It's, yeah, but you're not 22. You're an old infant, right? And that's an ugly thing, an old infant. So part of the reason you choose your damn sacrifice, because the sacrifice is inevitable.
Yep.
Research shows brains see men as people, women as body parts. Men's amygdala, a brain region tied to emotions, empathy, and fear, activated more strongly in response to men's eyes. In addition, other brain regions tied to emotion and behavior didn't or did not activate as much when the men looked at women's eyes. The findings suggest that men are worse at reading women's emotions. So men don't see you as human, and they do not have the ability to connect with you when looking in your eyes. The male is the human form of AI. He is the original robot.
I actually have a hard time believing that there's actually male-centered women in this society. Men are the dumb. There was a girl on here the other day that came on here and said men are generationally ugly, and they dragged her for 40 days and 40 nights. Fuck generationally ugly. Generationally slow and delayed and arrested. How can you center such slow, feeble fucking creatures? And it doesn't get better. It starts young. Big up the boy moms. It starts young. You see it all through their early years, all through their teenage years, and then into adulthood. Just slow and fucking delayed. How can you be centered around anything men do? The way the world runs. Slow, stupid, nonsensical. No rhyme, no motherfucking reason, and barely any real fucking order. Slow. Just slow. I don't know if they putting something in the air, the water, the food, what it is that's making that mutation of that XY. Just generationally fucking slow. The slowness, though. How can you center that? How can you center that? And that leads me to believe that y'all are slow. You know what's really isolating? Fuck all the marginalized identifiers. Common sense is kind of isolating. Real fucking isolating. Y'all don't even ask that man to read a paragraph before y'all have babies with him. Fuck generationally ugly. Slow. Okay? And this transcends race, religion, creed, sexual orientation, presentation. Slow. Fucking slow.
Wow. Let's just give me a second. Let me process that.
Why do Marines have more daughters than sons?
If you walk into a Special Forces ODA and you take all 12 dudes and you say, all right, Carlos, how many kids do you have? He's like, 4 girls. Ben, how many kids do you have? 3 girls. You just go right down the row. If you find a boy in the mix, he's held up as a Adonis.
So he has a point here, and there's signs to back it up. So there is growing evidence that Y chromosomes, which are the chromosomes that make male children, are more fragile than X chromosomes. And when I say more fragile, I mean it's more sensitive to environmental stress. And here's the kicker. Only men pass on Y chromosomes, since only men have a Y chromosome. That means whatever is affecting a man's body, stress, heat, or environmental toxins, can potentially impact the health of that sperm. More specifically, the sperm with the Y chromosome. So when you're in the military and your job has a lot of combat, stress, high heat, potential toxin exposure, it's very likely that you won't have many healthy Y-bearing sperm. That means fewer healthy boy sperm to make their way to the egg. And here's a study in soccer players that showed that the more intensely they trained, the more likely they were to have daughters. So yeah, the saying manly men only have daughters isn't merely a scientific myth. Those manly men are likely working jobs that put them under increased stress, which means less boy sperm to make their future sons.
No, I mean, I had to get weird to get a boy.
Operators like you guys, you tip of the spear guys, when you have children, it's always girls.
Most UFC fighters now have girls.
Really?
Joe Rogan sweats testosterone.
Ryan Stan had,
and I have 2 boys. You were saying you have a technique.
There was a plethora of techniques. Male swimmers swim faster but don't last as long. If you come early in our there's more time for the female swimmers to make it to the egg to fertilize. But if you do it at the end of the ovulation, it's just going to be the fast boys, and then it's over. And if you didn't get a boy, cool, you can try next time. Body fat, body temperature, athleticism, these are all things that skew towards female offspring.
Whoa. So if you just finished working out, for example.
Bad time.
Of course, male biologists are like, it's the fastest sperm that gets to become a person. It's that simple. It's a race sport. And now we know that it's actually the egg that selects what sperm she wants to fertilize her based on probably a lot of complicated genetic, I don't know, code reading? I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I do know that the egg selects the sperm. And I'm like, what were these male scientists even doing when they were doing their reproductive work? Like, how did you just come to the conclusion that it's just a simple race? It's a sport. It's like a sport. We love sports. When in reality, it's just so much more complicated than that. It makes me so mad, but it's also so absurd and expected at this point that, you know, we got to question everything.
Wow. Let's just give me a second. Let me process that.
Now, I told y'all the patriarchy is backwards day every day. It's been so interesting to see the news recently about men's fertility and women's fertility, and how basically everything we've been told about women's fertility as we age has been a freaking lie. But not only a freaking lie, no. But we've also found out that that lie directly mimics what actually happens to men. It's almost like they, what do you call it? Projected onto us. This obsession with young women and young women's fertility has really been nothing but projection and gaslighting. Literally the number 2 and 3 most popular tools of the patriarchy. So men have been projecting their own reality and insecurities about said reality onto women. And simultaneously, they've been gaslighting us to believe that our women's fertility traits are actually theirs. What a number the patriarchy has done on all of us. Yikes. It's their sperm quality that goes down as they age precipitously, not our eggs. Turns out menopause is actually a response to environmental triggers and stressors. And that would make sense that as a woman's male partner ages, the ovaries can tell that the quality of their sperm is clicking. And it's clicking down. So of course it would shut up shop. Wow. Whole time, these motherfuckers are calling women who are having children in their 30s geriatric. And it's them. They're the geriatrics. Just like they project onto us their fear of dying alone. Women don't die alone. Men do. Because they burn so many goddamn bridges throughout their lifetime. Single women have friends. They have families. They belong to organizations. They have community. It's single men who are dying alone. And they project that fear onto women so that women are scared into being in relationships with them so that what? They don't die alone. Men have literally stolen our identity and projected their identity onto us. Never forget, the patriarchy is backwards day every day. The patriarchy is upside down day every day.
I had my first baby at 47, my first baby at 42. We don't know any women over 40 whose children came out with chromosomal abnormalities. Nope. None of our friends over 40 who had babies have unhealthy babies of any sort.
Did you know that men go through their version of menopause called andropause? But it starts at age 30. Not 40 like us with perimenopause and eventually into our 50s when menopause actually sets in. Theirs starts at age 30. With a steady decline in their testosterone, they develop a cluster of symptoms called irritable male syndrome. So all this time, we were raised to believe that we are the hormonal ones. We are the emotional ones, the irrational ones, driven by our hormones. But all of their aggression, irrationality, and irritability comes as a result of their version of their own menopause at 30?
Yo, there's like a big crisis, like with young men having ED nowadays, right?
Really? Okay.
And I mean, yo, you see it, right? A lot of these guys, like I walk around every day, right, and I see honey packets on the ground. You know what I mean? Like you know, like blue chews everywhere,
Blue chews, honey packets, all that
stuff, right? Viagra, all these, like all this
Not
stuff.
only that, nigga is heavily exposed, and then people are perks.
Men go through their version of menopause called andropause, but it starts at age 30.
Actually true. Testosterone begins dropping at age 30, and by 40 it drops 1% per year. Because decline is gradual, your body adjusts. Some men feel it hard, others barely notice it. Declining T levels hit the brain hard, low motivation, confidence, plus the usual low libido, poor muscle health.
We really need to stop talking about women's hormonal cycles, menstruation, pregnancy, and menopause as if they're proof women are unstable, emotional, or untrustworthy. That narrative has been weaponized for centuries to keep women out of power. Here's the reality. Men have hormonal cycles too, and they affect behavior far more than we admit. Women's cycles are well documented, monthly rhythms, predictable stages, clear physiological purpose. But men's hormones actually fluctuate daily, monthly, and across the lifespan too. Daily, testosterone peaks in the morning, drops all day, and that drop affects mood, energy, patience, and risk-taking. Monthly, men actually experience a roughly 30-day testosterone rhythm, much like women's menstrual cycle and length. It's not talked about, but it's measurable. And over their lifetime, testosterone declines with age. Midlife dips can cause irritability, impulsive decisions, depression, and withdrawal. That's sometimes called andropause. And testosterone isn't steady, it's reactive. Competition, stress, sex, fatherhood, all of these can cause swings in men's hormones, which in turn influence aggression, decision-making, and even empathy. So why don't we hear more about male hormonal instability the way we hear about women's? Because the culture benefits from keeping women's biology suspect and men's biology invisible. If we judge men by the same standard applied to women, we'd have to ask uncomfortable questions like, should we trust men in leadership when their testosterone is low? How many wars or market crashes have been fueled by hormone-driven aggression? If women are called emotional, why aren't men called unstable for volatility linked to their own hormones? Here's the truth. Hormones make humans cyclical. We're all rhythmic, dynamic, and biologically influenced. The real instability is the double standard, pretending only women's bodies affect their minds while men's chemistry gives them a free pass. So maybe it's time to flip the narrative. Instead of using hormones as a weapon against women, let's start asking why men's hormones-driven behavior have been excused, hidden, or even glorified. Because the evidence is clear. Instability may just be a male problem, not a female one.
Men undergo andropause because it is the evolutionary sign that men are supposed to be unearthed after they pass on their genes. Women, on the other hand, are one of the few primates who they get to live on a long life after menopause. The reason being is because of the grandmother theory. It is no coincidence that grandparents, so this statistic isn't even gendered, although you could argue that most grandparents that are helping with children are primarily grandmothers. They live longer than grandparents that do not help with their children. This is due to the evolutionary sign that younger women were able to have more children because their grandmothers could be active in helping them raise the children, hence why they were able to still live after reaching menopause. No matter how you cut it, women have more to offer during their lifespan. Men don't have as many things to offer as they go through life. This is why they don't live as long. Despite all of the manufactured ways in which they can live longer, despite all of the advances made in healthcare to aid men to live longer, they still are not able to live longer than women. You can't cheat evolution. The individuals that have the stronger genetic material is going to stay here the longest. It's no other way that you can justify that. Whoever has more to contribute on Earth is going to stay on Earth longer. Because unlike the man science that's constantly been perpetuated, women are not only here to give birth. Because who is going to be the ones to look after these children after they give birth and after these children get older? It's not going to be the men. See, when men say that women are only good for childbearing, it's no issue with that. But then when biology and evolution favors women for having that ability due to us being able to live longer, then men all of a sudden have an issue with it. Men don't contribute to the long-term evolution of our species advancing. They only contribute to the creation. You can create something and you can help create a plant, but if you don't water it, if you don't put it in sunlight, if you do not give it the environment that it needs, your plant is not going to thrive. Women are the ones that are actually cultivating the advancement of the quote-unquote plant, which are the children. This is the reason why women tend to be in like fields of work, line of work that was given to them. Who's going to take care of the children when the women are the ones that know how to cook? Who's going to take care of people that go to the hospital when healthcare is a female-dominated field? Who's going to be watching the children when most daycares are ran by women? There is no field where caregiving is tied to men. Men are naturally not caregivers of children. And so if we were to reduce everything from a biological evolutionary standpoint, there would be no long-term need for men to exist because they don't do the caregiving of children. And that is the reason why women live long past them undergoing menopause, because they actually have something to contribute outside of giving birth, because they are the ones keeping the children alive.
Our species, another piece about our species that's really strange, is we're one of 3 species that have menopause. So that's the power of women. They can produce life. It's an unbelievable power. It's the most amazing power imaginable. So not only have we evolved menopause, but we've evolved women to live longer. So basically, the 3 big brain animals on the planet, the females go off reproduction, they go offline, and the last quarter of their life, they're grandmas. We've evolved grandmas. Now, there's no reason on Earth to evolve grandmas unless females provide something that transcends the ability to create life. And when you think about it, what could be more powerful than creating life? That you would take women offline for the last part of their life, the last quarter century for a human lifespan. And whatever it is, nature is like, yeah, men don't need to live as long. We'll give them 90% the life expectancy. Isn't that crazy? Here's the answer. You ready? I've given you long enough to think about it. Education. Our species, killer whales and elephants, rely on information to survive. And the way you can pass on that is you have to have educators. What happens by the time you're 45? Well, you've experienced a lot of the world. You have a lot of information. You have a lot of wisdom. Childbirth is dangerous. There's a high probability you will die every time you give birth. If I can take you offline, I protect that wisdom and knowledge and then give you the opportunity now to pass it on to your grandchildren. And so we've created grandmothers specifically to give the opportunity to pass it on to the grandchildren. But think about what I'm then saying, but not grandfathers so much. Peterson is supposed to keep you around for 15 years of wisdom, but menopause keeps her around for 25 years of wisdom. So her wisdom is clearly, according to evolution, significantly more valuable than my wisdom. So just think about the implication of what I'm saying here.
Let me tell you something. The reason why I be telling y'all not to trip about these men and whatnot is because I work in the healthcare field. I've been in the healthcare field since I was 18 years old. They're dying alone. They're dying alone. The women that's in these places, their daughters are coming and bringing them to the nail shops, getting their hair done, coming to see them every 2 weeks. You better ask somebody. I am the one who is right there when some of these men are taking their last breath. I have cleaned so many dead bodies, and guess what? Nobody showed up for them. Not their kids, not their wives, not their grandkids. Nobody came for them because why? They were not good men while they were alive. They're gonna continue dying alone. That's why I tell y'all don't trip. I'm physically seeing it on a daily basis, watching them all go by themselves. And this is their grandpas that they're talking about. These are the men that they're talking about. This is their grandpas that's dying alone. And it's going to be them. That's just the reality of shit. That's why I don't be worried about these men talking, because baby, I watch y'all every day go by yourselves with nobody on y'all side.
Wow. Let's just give me a second. Let me process that.
Does anyone else think their family proves the gay gene exists? I'm the oldest of 3 boys, I'm bisexual, my middle brother's bisexual, my youngest brother's gay, and my parents were thrilled to finally get a full one. But when you go 3 for 3 on fruity kids, something zesty's got to be swimming in that gene pool, right? So whenever I go home, I try and figure out if I got it from my mum and my dad by laying little tests, little traps to figure out which one is living the lie. Over Christmas, this was in the form of movie suggestions. I said one night, how about we watch Brokeback Mountain, and then carefully watch my dad for his reaction. His face lights up and he goes, yeah, I'd love to watch that. It's my favourite movie. I've got him banged to rights. But then suddenly, out of nowhere, my mum goes, no, you know what? What I'd prefer to watch instead, I would like to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the release of my favourite film, Carol. And I said, Carol as in the movie where Cate Blanchett's a lesbian, like she is in real life. And my mum goes, yes, I love that movie. It makes me cry every time. And it's my favourite book. And that's when I realised that me and my brothers had no choice in the matter of our queerness, because we got it from both of them.
Did you know that men with older brothers are more likely to be homosexual? This phenomenon is called the fraternal birth order effect and was discovered by Ray Blanchard and Anthony Bogar in 1996. The pair gave 302 homosexual men a self-administered anonymous questionnaire regarding their biodemographics. They then compared the results of the homosexual men against heterosexual men given the same questionnaire, and what they found was very interesting. They found that the more older brothers a male had, the more likely he was to be homosexual. Each additional brother increasing that likelihood by 33%. Since roughly 2% of men with no older brothers identified as homosexual, the likelihood of homosexuality rose 2.6% for men with one older brother, then rose 3.5% for men with 2 older brothers, and so on. It's important to note that this pattern was only found among men that had the same mother. This means that men with older brothers that weren't fully related to them, specifically through their mother, were not predisposed to homosexuality. That finding implies that it might be formed prenatally. In 2017, a study found a link between maternal immune responses to NRLGN4Y-linked protein, male birth order, and the outcome of their son's sexuality. NRLGN4Y is a gene that is integral to the development of a male's brain, specifically their synapses, while they are a fetus. They hypothesized that because NRLGN4Y is located on the Y chromosome and is therefore foreign to a female's immune system, at each time she carries a male fetus, her body builds up antibodies against male-specific proteins, potentially influencing sexual orientation in those male fetuses because of the antibodies' ability to manipulate the gene's state. To test their hypothesis, they compared antibody levels among different groups of women who had all had children. They found that mothers with gay sons who had older brothers had the highest antibody levels, while women with no sons at all had the lowest. All of this evidence supports the notion that homosexuality is not just a choice or merely a product of environment. Rather, that sexuality in general has a biological basis. However, sexuality does not start or end with these studies. As a matter of fact, only 15 to 28% of homosexual men can actually attribute their sexuality to the fraternal birth order effect. So, at the end of the day, there is no gay gene, and there is likely no single cause for sexual orientation. It's important when having conversations about sexuality that we approach it with nuance. As a matter of fact, it's important to approach anything neurological with nuance since we know nothing.
The more older brothers a guy has, the more testosterone he's exposed to in utero, and the higher probability it is that he'll be gay.
Wow.
Now, that's not always the case. It doesn't mean you have 5 older brothers, you'll be gay, but much higher probability of being gay if you have more older brothers. With each older brother, the probability of a male baby growing up into a gay man increases significantly.
Gosh.
Okay, super interesting. Now, all of this is interesting because it shows that there's what we call organizational effects of hormones in utero. None of this can be because of behavior. In fact, these differences are present at birth.
Okay.
Okay. And then, of course, the question I asked when I was on the study is if I would chop off my index finger, does my testosterone go up? The answer is no. So, you know, when we think about like partner selection, like, you know, heterosexual, homosexual, you know, I think years ago it was thought that this was, you know, there were still people that thought this was a behavioral choice. Listen, newsflash, this is clearly a biological phenomenon.
Okay.
None of this, clearly, like, you know, and I understand that, but there's of course also flexibility. You could imagine that some people, because of experience, decide that they're gonna, you know, bat for the other team.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
A lot of my gay friends are like, it's not a choice, right? It's just like, it's who you are. And I'm like, well, why, after you've had a drink, are you trying to get me to choose it? That's a thing for me.
That's a very good
it's
point.
It's like reverse psychology.
Actually,
they're trying to trick you or something. Wiener trick.
It's not even a matter of opinion. It's a matter of fact based on science. And while I'm not a geneticist, I do have a science degree. So I'm going to break this down into layman's terms, and then I'm never going to address it again, because too many men took a well-intentioned and well-articulated message and reduced it to this conversation. And that really bothers me. Now, to the example that you used, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Science tells us that the egg came first. What is the egg? Female sex cells. You know, there are some species that are capable of asexual reproduction. Only the females of those species can reproduce themselves independently of a male, meaning they don't need sperm as a fertilization. They can do it on their own. There is no male species that can reproduce itself independently of a female. Even seahorses, we know that the male is the one that gives birth, but they still need the eggs from the female to do it. Males cannot reproduce themselves. So if males were first, how did they get here? They would have needed somebody to birth them. Now, in reference to humans, X is the default. The X chromosome is the female chromosome. X and X create a female, X and Y create a male. But either way, X is present because X is the blueprint to human creation. You cannot exist without it. Y is not a factor without X. That's just how it works. Now, in your first comment, you said that the seed was equivalent to life, and I believe you said that the man was the seed. That's not true. The seed would be more akin to the egg. The male would be the fertilizer. Sperm fertilizes the egg. The female incubates the egg. That baby's going to grow within her body. It's going to leach from her life source. And once it's strong enough to live independently of her, she'll give birth to it, because women are the givers of life. We are humanity's portal to the earth. Men are not. X is the beginning. X is the foundation of humanity. That's scientific fact. This is not me saying that. And the fact that we're here talking about this when that whole video was about something completely different really upsets me, because it seems as if every time I try to get the community on the same page, there's always somebody that has to derail the conversation. Now, this isn't in direct reference to you. You said you were asking out of curiosity, and that's fine. But I noticed that it was only the men, and it was a handful of them, because a lot of men were with it. They were listening, and I appreciate that. But it was only the men who pushed back and completely disregarded the rest of the message because they didn't like that part. I'm not telling you guys my opinion. I'm telling you guys what science says. And the whole point of me even using the analogies that I use was to show you the way that they trick us into believing the lies and the fallacies over fact. And then everybody still fell for it. So I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Any other questions need to be referred to Google, because I'm not going to do it.
Let's have a conversation about the link between sperm, cancer, and other disorders. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist. I've been counseling women and men who have experienced abuse, as well as those who have been perpetrators of abuse and other violent crimes. And I want to let you guys know I'm not a medical doctor. But, you know, one of the reasons I thought of this is many years ago, I went to East Carolina University. And, you know, when I was at East Carolina University, I was on a couple of research teams. And one research team I was on in particular is that of Dr. Hal Daniels. I don't know if he's still at East Carolina in the biology department. But when I was under him, I learned a lot from him. And, we did research on the link between sperm and several disorders, including like schizophrenia and, alcohol, other genetic disorders in babies and things of that nature. So it was a really fun time. I also used to do DNA testing during my time at East Carolina University. It was DNA testing on plants. So I was heavy into research back then. And anyhow, one of the things I wanted to come on here and talk to you about was some of the stuff that I learned under, working with him. And one of the things that I learned from him was that, all men, if they live long enough, generally speaking, there's probably some exceptions. If they live long enough, will have prostate cancer, give or take. And that's usually men who live to be over the age of 70. And some of them, many of them will die without ever being diagnosed. So in other words, they'll have it, but they don't know that they have it. And the other thing that came out of that was the link between sperm and cervical and uterine cancer in women. Specifically, sperm contains prostaglandins. And, so that can, while it doesn't necessarily cause it per se, but it could add to the acceleration of cervical and uterine cancer in women from the prostaglandins hormone within sperm. And now something has changed and I'm wrong. Please feel free if anybody's a medical doctor or research scientist out there and you see this, but I Googled it. And as far as I know, it's still, looks like Google and everything like that, it still tracks. So, but I don't know if any new research has come out about it. The other thing that I found out in doing, research on Dr. Daniels' team was that sperm carries a lot of the genetic, makeup. So whereas things were traditionally thought to, like disorders and things like that babies are born with, were traditionally thought to be caused by the mother's DNA or by, whatever the mother's going to. So like going through like environmental factors or stressors. A lot of the research that I found out at that time, that we were doing at that time, it was understood that actually a lot more of it is related to paternal health, paternal environmental stressors, and teratogens that fathers are ingesting. And teratogens would be things like alcohol and or other drugs that they're ingesting. Actually has more of an impact on, fetal development than maternity, factors and things like that. And not to say that both of them don't affect fetal growth and development, because they do. But, my understanding from at that time was it actually a lot more of it came from paternity. So from the father side. So when you're looking at things like fetal alcohol syndrome or other disorders caused by, maybe fathers, with alcoholism, there seems to be a strong link between that actually coming from the father's DNA. So other things that, had come out and during that research is like, disorders that are caused by alcoholic fathers. So one of those things that I found out, would be hearing issues. So deafness in infants and, things like that. And not to say that there can't be other causes, but those, there's a strong link between hearing impairment in infants and children. And again, teratogens ingested by dad. The other thing, which, a lot of people are talking about how they feel like they have this now, is the link between other like mental disorders and things like that in fetal development. So a lot of people talk about feeling like they have ADD or ADHD, or there seems to be a surge of that. There's also a link between, ADD, ADHD, and autism spectrum disorder and paternal sperm. Specifically, sperm that is older or compromised, like by teratogen, seems to be the culprit of the development of several neurodevelopmental disorders, including autism spectrum disorder. So, there's been evidence, at least at that time, and again, I haven't kept up with that in quite some time. There was evidence that, sperm mutates the older it gets, older men especially, it's mutated, but also teratogens cause sperm to mutate quite significantly, which may lead to increased likelihood of having an infant that develops attention deficit disorder, autism spectrum disorder. And where I left off when I was on the research team was we were starting to look at the link between, paternal health, paternity and schizophrenia. So I'm not sure whatever happened to that, but it was quite interesting. And so let me know what your thoughts are. And again, if some of my research is outdated and you guys have something newer or fresher, or let me know. And I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
And to be honest, I should have been known it was men's sperm, because I knew that women have their eggs. Women are born with their eggs, right? So the eggs were young and youthful when we retrieved them, when we got them. And they lied to us and let us think, oh, it's because you're born with those eggs. They just get old and shriveled up, just like you, bitch. Just like you. And that's why they don't work no more, right? The older you get. But if you really think about it, because women are born with their eggs, they're young, youthful, forever. Forever. Those are youthful eggs forever. Okay? Men generate sperm every day, and like 90% of those sperms, don't quote me on this percentage, but a lot of those sperms are blanks. Okay? It takes about 60 to 80 days for them to fully form. They're generating them every day. So the older they get, the worse the quality of the sperm they generate is. Like, this is now clicking, it's now making sense. But they tried to tell us that it was the opposite, right? They tried to tell us it was the opposite. That because we were born with our eggs, that they just get old and shriveled up just like us the older we get. Because men generate sperm every day. Somehow, even at 80 years old, their sperm is still popping. Somehow their sperm is still popping. That's a lie. I should have known that was a motherfucking lie. I have a science background. And you know what? And when I learned about it, I was like, this is a little off, right? But because the patriarchy and misogyny is so deeply ingrained in so many of us, we're taught not to question nothing when it comes to any fact that makes it seem like men are superior. We're taught not to question it. But I did have an inkling of like, I guess that makes sense. It didn't. What else they lying to us about? That's what I want to know. What other non-truths do we think are truths that we're sitting on today? Hello? Wake it up.
Truthfully, had y'all told the girls that the boys can throw off your pH balance versus telling us that we can get pregnant, I think a lot of us would have never had sex. If y'all would have explained yeast infections and BVs to girls like early on, and that boys bring them because they're dirty or they're having sex with multiple women unprotected, a lot of girls would have kept their legs closed. I'm sure of it.
And honestly, ever since I found out that men in their 30s and 40s are the reason that children have disabilities because their sperm go bad, I actually be side-eyeing the women that still choose to lay down with these men in those age ranges, and they be in their fucking 20s. Like, why are y'all fucking doing that to kids? Why are y'all doing that to your future kids? Your future kids can have potential disabilities, mental, physical disabilities, because that man's sperm is going bad. Why are you keeping the baby? Like, what the fuck?
One thing you can always guarantee on social media is that someone will get in the comment section trying to disagree with something they don't even understand. It is no excuse in 2025 for adults to get on the internet still shouting and spouting about the seed that men do not have. Okay? It's clear that most adults, although they have children and they participate in the process, they don't understand the basic biology. So I'm here to take you to class today. This is a seed, right? A seed is the thing that you put into the ground that you plant, whether literally in the ground or spiritually in the womb. And the plant, the fruit, the baby comes from, right? This is fertilizer. Okay? This is what helps the plant grow, right? It gives it a little boost, if you will. Fertilizer. Seed. Fertilizer. Seed. Did you know that women are born with all the eggs, all the possible babies that they can have? Did you know that mothers store the eggs of their daughters, of their granddaughters, so on and so forth, right? Let's recap. Seed. The plant comes from this. The plant does not come from this. Seed, fertilizer. Seed, fertilizer. Egg, veggie. The veggie comes from this. The veggie don't come from this. The baby comes from the seed. The baby does not come from the fertilizer. Egg. What is this? Okay. Men's contribution to the baby making process. Okay. And did you know that this is not even necessary? Okay. Seed equals baby. Milky white substance equals fertilizer. Women have the seeds. Men have the shit.
Yo, okay, y'all listen to this. Researchers have known for over 20 years which parent is responsible for giving us our fibroids. And no, it is not going to surprise you. No, you are not going to be shocked. Okay? Researchers have found that we get our fibroid genes from our fathers. Yes, you got it from your daddy. You got it from your daddy. Let's take a look. The researchers discovered 3 paternally expressed imprinted genes that are upregulated in fibroids as compared to normal myometrium. Okay, in paternally expressed imprinted genes, the gene copy received from the father is expressed, while the gene copy received from the mother is not expressed. What does this mean? Basically, what this means is when they were studying and analyzing the genes inside of fibroid tissue, they only found paternally expressed genes. And the mother's genes were not expressed inside of fibroid tissue. When they compared it to the tissue in the myometrium and the endometrium, what they found was that the genes are from the mother, only from the mother, and there are no paternally expressed genes in a healthy myometrium. What does this mean? This means that the cells that would normally go on to create a healthy myometrium cell is differentiating and replicating abnormally to create your fibroid tissue. So what does this mean exactly? Well, long story short, it means that your father's genes are not where they're supposed to be. They are not where they belong. And when you have this invasion of patriarchal cells coming into the womb, trying to change its natural function, trying to disrupt its natural processes, okay, it's because the patriarchy is trying to take over our source. Okay, it's trying to suck our life force from us. It's trying to take over our sexual and creative processes. It's literally trying to hijack our system. Okay, so when you have fibroids inside of your womb, you essentially have hijackers inside of your womb. All right, and they want the womb to belong to them. Researchers have successfully shown that women and girls inherit our fibroids from our fathers. This is part 2 in a series where I'm going to be explaining and breaking down an article that has been out for over 20 years, since 2002, where researchers were able to identify genes inside of fibroid tissue and compare it to genes inside of myometrium and see that there are no maternally expressed genes inside of a fibroid, meaning your fibroids are invaders. They are infiltrators. They are cells that have hijacked your myometrial cells to work for them, to do its bidding. And that's essentially what the patriarchy has done. In the last video, I talked about how the patriarchy wants to hijack your system, wants to take over your center, right, your power, so that now you are orbiting it, so that now you are centering the patriarchy. But there's more. The patriarchy does not have a direct channel to source. Okay, the patriarchy does not have a direct channel to source, and the patriarchy does not come from source. Okay, so because the patriarchy wants to have spiritual dominion over the world, because the patriarchy wants to enslave souls, it needs to go to the source. All right, instead of the patriarchy being like, okay, let's learn from the feminine, let's bend to the feminine, let's embrace it, let's respect it. No, they decided they were going to hijack it, okay, that they were going to take it over so that the womb becomes enslaved to it. So this is basically what happens with viruses and cancer cells, is the patriarchal poison, the patriarchal spell goes inside of our womb. Think about this as a cell, okay? And it basically confuses or deceives the womb, disguises itself that it's a part of us, but it's really not, infiltrates our wombs, and then it starts to take over our biological processes, takes us out of coherence, takes us out of alignment, takes us out of balance, and now starts to differentiate and mutate our cells and its processes. Okay. And that is what these fibroids are doing, is they have now, think of them as leeches, as parasites that have latched themselves, attached themselves to your core, attached themselves to your center, so they can pull and suck out your power, suck out your life force. And this is why so many women who have fibroids have a really hard time creating anything of their own, and they struggle with infertility, because it has also been found, and I'll talk about this in another video, that the molecules that researchers have identified in the center of fibroids actually disrupts implantation, embryo implantation on purpose. So these patriarchal cells, these toxic, demonic patriarchal cells that go inside of your womb, their goal is to enslave your myometrial cells. They're enslaving your womb so that you can do its bidding, right? So instead of following your passions, instead of creating your creative ministry or your service, you go out and you do the bidding of the patriarchy. Okay. And this is why so many women who also have fibroids are people pleasers, are women who are desperate to be wanted and loved and liked. They overwork, they overextend. They have all of these traits of a woman now who is centering and orbiting the patriarchy. Because now, instead of orbiting her womb, she's confused in orbiting the fibroids. In my next video, I'm going to talk about how this psychologically impacts a woman.
Wow. Let's just give me a second. Let me process that.
Baby boys are going out of fashion. For most of history, parents have wanted sons, as they traditionally inherited the family's name and its wealth. But in recent years, this bias for boys has dramatically decreased in developing countries, and in the rich world, people are even starting to prefer daughters. If you leave it up to nature, there are roughly 105 male births for every 100 female ones. It's thought that this is an evolutionary response to higher male mortality. In the past, families tended to be bigger, so most parents ended up with a mix of sons and daughters. However, as families started to have fewer children, they could no longer assume they definitely have a boy. The spread of ultrasound in the 1980s gave parents a way to choose.
It looks again.
The result? A massacre of female fetuses in some parts of the world. According to The Economist's calculations, roughly 50 million fewer girls have been born globally since 1980 than you would expect. In 2000, the worst year, there were around 1.7 million more male births than would have been normal. Many of these missing girls are an unintended consequence of China's draconian one-child policy. When parents were only allowed one child and were desperate for a boy, they were more likely to abort girls. But since 2010, the number of missing girls has fallen dramatically. In developing countries such as Bangladesh and in parts of sub-Saharan Africa, there's now a desire for a mix of sons and daughters. And in the rich world, there's evidence of an emerging preference for girls. In South Korea, for example, the share of women who felt it necessary to have a son plunged from 48% in 1985 to 6% in 2003. Now, nearly half would prefer a daughter. In America and Scandinavia, couples are more likely to have multiple children if the early ones are male, suggesting that they're more likely to keep trying for a girl than a boy. Reasons for this bias vary. Girls are seen as easier to bring up. Traits seen as female are cherished. Many parents expect their daughters to look after them in old age. Meanwhile, the world has recently been exposed to a torrent of news about poor male behavior. At the moment, there's little evidence this new bias has led to the widespread abortion of boys. But other technologies for choosing a child's sex, such as sperm selection and genetic tinkering, are rapidly developing. In some countries, such as America, their use is legal. As they get cheaper, they may spread, so there's a chance in the future girls may outnumber boys, and no one knows what kind of society that might create.
One reason black men are becoming homosexuals is because life is too fucking hard for a disciplined, strong black man.
I mean, y'all built the world, didn't you? See, this was 5 years ago before Kevin Samuels was on that we built the world. So now, polite say, the reason we become homosexuals because life is too fucking hard. But I thought y'all built the world. Every door I try to go through, every job I ask for, they turn us down. But I thought y'all built the world. That's what I'm trying to find out. Where's all that vibrato? Huh? See, this was before Kevin Samuels came out with We Built the World. This was the truth right here. We become homosexuals and we won't put on a dress because life too fucking hard. Now they done built the world. That's why I tell y'all, stop talking to their ass. Stop. Black, for some reason, and they think that they're different. Y'all are not different. You're not as different as you think you are, right? So when Polite was saying that life is too hard for the so-called black male, Jordan Peterson is saying the same thing in terms of white males. This is a male issue. It don't have nothing to do with your skin color, right? It don't have nothing to do with your ethnicity, but they think it does, right? Everybody is suffering under patriarchal philosophy. Everybody's suffering. The white male included, right? So the white male is just as afraid or as hurt or downtrodden, right? The ones that ain't making it in this system, right? The ones who are being replaced by AI, they're getting in dresses too and invading women's spaces because the walls are closing in on males, and males either gonna repent or they gonna get shut out, right? They're gonna get shut out. And so they're running into women's spaces by usurping women's identity. Because this is why I focus so much on the brain differences. The brain differences of a male versus a female. The woman has a relationship to life. The woman is nature's resource. The male is not. And you have these guys who fundamentally have no relationship to life, trying to usurp the spaces of women to shut them out. It is something that is critical that women need to stand up for. That's why it's important for women to really understand the biological makeup of a male. If women keep buying into the social bullshit, right? If you place the sociological program before the biological program, you create a disorder. The biological program is the foundation and everything must start there. Biologically, okay, if men are incapable of love and they think they can be women, this is why it's so important for women to really understand the major differences, because this will give women more of a reason to stand up for themselves, right? More of a reason. If y'all learn that men are incapable of love, you will be able to see the fundamental difference in everything that they're doing, which will give you more of a reason for you to protect your space. Let's go back to How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Book that was copywritten in 1936. This is a book written about men, by men, for men. Womb envy. It's womb envy. Men for men. Sigmund Freud said that everything you and I do springs from two motives: the sex urge and the desire to be great. The desire to be great. John Dewey, one of America's most profound philosophers, phrased it a bit differently. Dr. Dewey said that the deepest urge in human nature is the desire to be important. Women are already important. They're born important. The male is not. You hear them say it all the time. Women are born with value. Men have to build value. So the desire to be important is a male issue. The desire to be important, right? Lincoln once began a letter saying everybody likes a compliment. William James said the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. He didn't speak, mind you, of the wish or the desire or the longing to be appreciated. He said the craving to be appreciated. This is something that the male does not experience. So they get that recognition when they put on dresses and they become women, because women naturally have importance. Women naturally draw attention because the feminine side of polarity, or the feminine side, is the attractive side.
Wow. Let's just give me a second. Let me process that.
Do you know how many adults out here actually believe that women came from a man's rib? You know how powerful the womb is. If that was true, then every man on this planet will be missing a rib. They are not. If you do your research, you will see that men and women both have the same number of ribs. Men are not missing any ribs. Women have XX chromosomes, men have XY chromosomes. You could tell the Bible was written by a group of men that wanted domination over humanity, especially women.
So men who are raised with a lot of patriarchal entitlement but no real power are the most dangerous group of men, in my opinion, because the way they choose to express their masculinity is through this like very aggressive, hypersexual form of policing behavior. Like, I've seen it most in men that come from post-war societies, men who come from like typically economically marginalized communities, men who have cultures that have this real heavy emphasis and obsession with like honor and gender and women. So you'll see it in like religious men, Christian men, men who engage in like incel subcultures. You see it in so many diasporas, Arab, Asian, African communities, because all of these men are raised with this like idea that they are entitled to dominance simply because they are men. And they view women as nothing but figures that are supposed to represent honor, and that female sexuality is something that's supposed to be controlled. But then they grow up and then they enter the real world and they quickly realize, hey, I have little to no power whatsoever. All they do is experience like economic insecurity. They realize they have no institutional authority. They realize their status isn't even respected. They can't control their borders. They can't control how society sees them or treats them. They experience marginalization. They experience racism on a daily basis. So all of this is like a little bit of a psychic humiliation for them. So they default to the only domain that they feel like they still have power over and that they're still entitled to use, which is control over women. Like I said, being promised dominance but then denied power is a huge humiliation for that group of men. And I don't think men typically absorb humiliation the way women do. They just sort of displace it outward. Because these men can't express their masculinity through competence. They can't express it through leadership or achievements. So they use policing instead, because policing is the cheapest form of power. Because you don't need anything to police anyone. You don't need achievements. You don't need accolades. You don't need success. You don't need growth. All you need is permission and entitlement. And there's a great system called the patriarchy that gives men plenty of permission and plenty of entitlement to use. So obsessed with women's sexuality, with women's beliefs, with women's purity. That's why the language they use when they communicate with women they don't agree with is so violent and sexual and degrading, because they can't fight racism that they experience. They can't fight geopolitics. They can't fight their economic insecurity. They can't fight any of this stuff. So what they do, they just fight with women.
Here are 4 ways that the English translations of the Bible may have changed the origin story of Eve. The first is the translation of Eve coming from Adam's rib bone. What the text actually says is that Eve came from a side of Adam. So in rabbinic literature, you'll see this imagined as Adam and Eve being split from equal halves. The second is the translation of Eve being made as a helper for Adam. The Hebrew word here is actually closer to the word rescuer. Then you may remember the line in English that as a punishment, Eve's desire will be for her husband. But other translations, like the ESV, say that Eve's desire will be contrary to her husband. And lastly, there's that popular idea that painful childbirth is the result of the curse of sin. But the plain interpretation of the text is that there will be difficulty in conception.
Ladies, all I'm gonna ask is, who do you think made those translations?
Science hasn't even been in the hands of women for very long for us to be able to debunk most of the myths that men have tried to shove down our throats so that we would A, marry and reproduce early so that we could create the nation state, and B, so that we would be afraid of our own bodies. When have you ever learned that your clitoris literally wraps around your vaginal canal and that it is an erogenous and erectile sexual organ that is meant to facilitate childbirth? It is literally placed around the vagina so that its engorgement during birth will release enough oxytocin and beta endorphin so that we do not feel pain when we are crowning. But what has Hollywood and popular media and culture shown us? Women screeching their heads off and pushing, which means that their pelvic floor is contracted. So they're pushing against their pelvic floor to give birth. This is not natural. This has been popularized by the same science that tries to convince women that if you don't have a baby before 25, or if you have a baby after 30, you have a geriatric pregnancy. They are trying to convince us that we must give birth early, when actually science has now shown us that men, they are the ones whose sperm reduces in quality as they get older. I want you to know that most of what you know about your female body is not true. It is literally cloaked in shame and in a narrative that wants to convince you not to trust your body, wants to convince you to outsource your power to somebody else, to tell you when to push during labor, how far along you are in dilation. what your menopause is going to be like, what your periods should be like, that you should be ashamed to be menstruating, that your ovulation is only about ovulating and not actually this incredible creative potential that you get to harness for your life, that your luteal phase is supposed to be horrible, when in reality, you have more neuroplasticity when you are luteal. Do you know what that means, babe? That's when you learn the new dance moves. That's when you learn your new language. That's when you reinvent your life, when you're luteal internally, not the external outward doing, but the internal, which when you shift internally, you shift your outward reality. Are you getting it, babe? Our physiology is literally so powerful. The female form has so much potential. Do not let anyone convince you to fear your body.
Exodus of people leaving churches in general. But
Right.
one of the most religiously engaged groups that's growing right now is young men attending more conservative churches. Women are leaving in larger numbers than ever before.
If you want an easy example for why religion is by men for men, look at how it deals with menstruation. If you are Hindu and on your period, you cannot enter temples, perform pujas, or even touch sacred objects. In Shintoism in Japan, if you are on your period, you cannot enter sacred shrines or perform rituals. In many kinds of Islam, if you're on your period, you cannot pray or enter mosques. There are still some religious sites that will not even allow women of menstruating age. The Sabarimala temple in India finally reversed that through a court case in 2018, so like very recently. Some Christian Orthodox traditions say that you can't handle the Eucharist if you're on your period. In some Buddhist texts, because women are impure because they have menstruation, they have to reincarnate as a man to achieve enlightenment. We have records of theological debates in medieval Christianity where they're trying to decide whether menstruating women can handle the Bible or participate in theological discussions while they're on their period. Judaism, of course, has many rules around menstruation, and you have to do a ritual to purify yourself after menstruation. You're not allowed to touch your husband during it. It's a whole thing. Like across Buddhism and Hinduism, we have ideas that the woman's body is more impure, and so it's going to make their spiritual progress harder. But of all the religions that have told me that I'm impure in some way because my body does something that is very natural to my body, the one honestly that hurts the most is Jesus. Because when Jesus bleeds and Jesus gets blood everywhere, it is sacred and it is life-giving and it's life-affirming, and we're gonna do all of these rituals to show how life-affirming this blood is. It's sacred blood. And there's something to me just so hypocritical about women's bodies that create life and blood being a part of that, but yet when a man does it, it's sacred, and then when a woman does it, it's unclean and it's impure, and you're less than, and your body is less than, and you're gonna have a hard time becoming enlightened, and you're gonna be less spiritual, you're gonna have less access to spirituality. But when Jesus bleeds, that blood is okay. Jesus's blood did nothing and is praised as everything. But when a woman bleeds and that actually is tied to her ability to create life, it's impure. So not only did the Christian God take everything, like he creates everything without female, but Jesus also took the blood too. And then the women who bleed and actually create life are less than. And that is just such bullshit. There are a lot of things about Jesus that I like, but really what I hate the most is I just had someone yesterday say, I love Jesus because he's the perfect balance of masculine and feminine. And I said, that's great, but we only accept femininity or life-giving blood as sacred when it comes from a man. And that actually does have a cost for women if we only accept femininity when it comes with a penis. So I'm just gonna leave that there.
I was just thinking about this because tell me why the rules are so arbitrary. So Ramadan just started and my sister's friend is Muslim, and she said, well, during Ramadan, because you're unclean, if you have your period, you don't have to fast. And I was like, okay, a win is a win, but you still have to cook. I was like, isn't that funny? Men say you're too impure to pray. Literally cannot commune with God because you're so filthy, but you are still clean enough to do everything around the house. The Quran literally says everything except, lay with your husband. And I've seen so many women on the app in this past week talking about how they're not having the same experience in Ramadan as the men, because for men it's a time of spirituality and focus, but women have to do all the same things they always do. They're taking care of the house. They're fixing these feasts on an empty stomach all day, every day, and you can't even focus and do your prayer and everything right because you are serving all these men who make it about them. If you don't do the food right or you don't cook exactly what they want, and apparently what they want is very labor intensive, they're going to get angry and just ruin the whole day. And please go back and follow No Nonsense Spirituality, who I'm stitching. But like she said, the one that hurts the most for me is Jesus, because I myself was raised Baptist. As a Black Baptist, we didn't have those same kind of encoded religious instructions against touching things or being seen as impure, but it's very cultural. And my sisters know what I'm talking about. You know, you go to church and you sing, oh, the blood of Jesus, I know it was the blood. The blood will never lose its power, but the blood over the communion. And then you are told when you get home that if you leave out clean pads, you're some sort of unclean harlot. We literally sing, worship, honor the blood of Jesus, but the blood of women is so disregarded. And further than that, when I was a girl, which was not long ago, I just had my birthday yesterday. So when I was a girl in the 90s, women were still not preaching in my tradition. I grew up with ministers saying they would never ordain a woman, and that was commonplace. And it's no coincidence, in my opinion, that a lot of women who rose to prominence in the past couple of decades as ministers, as visionaries, as conduits of God, were then in abusive relationships, like Juanita Bynum and Yolanda Adams. Oftentimes, the church will break you down to nothing. Remember when Juanita Bynum came out, her whole message was no more sheets. Your entire spirituality as a woman is wrapped up in what you do or don't do with your vagina. That's all women are ever preached at about, celibacy and staying pure for your husband and serving a man. And then she had that huge elaborate wedding on TBN. God had finally sent her mate, and he had to marry both her hands and give her those 2 huge rings, all for him to later be exposed beating her in the parking lot of an Atlanta hotel where strangers had to pull him off. And what did the church do about it? Yes, nothing. And her husband was a minister. The church never sat him down, never punished him. He pled guilty. There were witnesses, and they say he pushed her down, kicked and stomped her, choked her. And he continued to have a church and live his life. She divorced him, and that sparked a huge conversation about the role of the church in DV, which still has not come very far. I remember there was a feature in Essence, and one woman who had been in a violent relationship said that, the church posits that you're supposed to suffer in life, and a lot of women think that this is just the suffering, their marriage, their abusive marriage, and they're made to think that by the church, and I completely agree. And there's that cultural component again. Oh, don't call the police on another Black man. If you want a better life as a woman, the first thing you should decenter is religion, particularly the Abrahamic ones. And I covered this in my upcoming book, It's All About You, Decentering Men and Others for a Better Life, in Chapter 2, The Religion of Self First. Because I've been telling you all for years, anything men say, believe the opposite. And religion has been the ultimate destiny swap. They took away all your power and left you with the work. So men have made themselves the life givers. They're aligned with the ultimate authority. They're the natural heads, according to them. And then they tell you, after having kept the power of literacy from most women in most cultures, oh, the Holy Book says that you are number 2. The Holy Book says you're underneath me. The Holy Book says you're supposed to submit to me. The Holy Book says you're unclean. And it says the things that you do daily, like caring for your children, cooking, cleaning, are either unimportant or actually have no spiritual merit, because that labor is invisible to men. The first time I ever recall having a real problem with this is when I was a girl, and you hear the story of Jesus, Mary, and Martha. Jesus loved to visit his friend Lazarus and his 2 sisters, Mary and Martha, and he would go to their house and hang out, enjoying Martha's hospitality, because Martha was tirelessly cooking and cleaning and doing everything she could to entertain Jesus in a lavish, hospitable way. Mary was sitting at Jesus' feet, soaking up the sunshine and listening to him teach. And when Martha got overwhelmed and she asked Jesus to tell Mary to help her, he said, Martha, Martha, you're upset and worried about many things, but few things are needed. Only one. Mary has chosen what's better, and it's not going to be taken away from her. So in other words, what you're doing is just temporary. It's not important. All while sitting there eating the food that Martha had made. As a child, it really pissed me off, because the thing is, Jesus, according to the Bible, had the power to create food from nothing. So why didn't you whisk away Martha's chores so she can sit here and learn too? What you did was dismiss her, devalue her work while still enjoying the fruits of her labor, and tell her the problem was all in her head. That was so disrespectful, because remember, guys, Jesus had a posse of 12 people he traveled around with. He had a whole entourage. Imagine grinding the grain into flour for the bread, baking the bread, fetching water by hand, etc., for all of these people. And then you're being told what you are doing has no merit. It's always going to be like that in spirituality, because the men at the center of it have never run a household. Jesus never had any children. And if he ever needed anything, he could either create it from a miracle or somebody else gave it to him, like the donkey he rode into the city. And if you continue to imbibe religion that teaches you that what you have to contribute to the world is not worthwhile, you will always feel like you're less than. Unless your spirituality is woman-centric and has a place to acknowledge the divine feminine, you are going to be made to feel as though your womanhood is something for you to overcome, that you have to get rid of Eve's sinful nature, or that you can't be disrespectful and lead a bad life. Like Jezebel, the most important thing you can be is pure like the Virgin Mary. And the most important thing you can do is be an appendage to a man. And through that, you might make some kind of difference in life, like Ruth or Queen Esther, or Abigail or Sarah. Are you touching and agreeing with men in the Bible bonding over trading the bodies of women young enough to be their daughters? Over the fact that the Bible and the Torah say that for a woman to avoid being labeled unclean if she's assaulted, she should marry her rapist? But it's cool if he doesn't marry her as long as he pays her father for what he took. The worst curse is the one you put on yourself. So be careful what you sit under and allow yourself to be taught as spirituality, as the word of God. And believe whatever you want. Worship any way you choose. Believe in any holy book you choose. But be aware that men kept women purposefully out of education, away from literacy. Only the highest born ladies in most cultures had access to those things because men didn't want to be able to read these texts for themselves, and now they've been translated so often in favor of men, you don't know what they originally said. Don't take anything on blind faith. That's
Absolutely, yes. Religion is a big reason why a lot of people stay in toxic relationships. And don't mind my cat, y'all. Like this person says, like, a lot of people stay because they don't believe in divorce. What God has brought together, may no man tear apart. Look, this is not me trying to disrespect anybody's religion or anything like that, y'all. But my true belief is that I don't think God put you here to suffer with a toxic, narcissistic, abusive partner. Because that toxic, narcissistic, abusive partner will absolutely tell you that God don't like divorce, that God don't believe in you leaving, because no matter what I did, it doesn't mean you should divorce me or you should break free of this marriage or anything like that. They will weaponize your religion or your cultural beliefs to keep you there with them, no matter how unhappy you are. So when my wife had left, this is like 4 years ago, I read the whole Bible from beginning to end because I was so lost. You know what I mean? And I was just like, one of the messages that I got from the Bible is that God didn't put you here to be unhappy your whole life. You know what I mean? A narcissist would tell you, like, God, just because you're unhappy right now in real life doesn't mean you won't be happy in the kingdom with God later on. So again, y'all, I'm not like, this is not me trying to trash anybody's religion, but just, for me, again, it's okay for you to pick you. It's okay for you to choose you. It's okay for you to choose happiness and not stew in a toxic relationship dynamic. Because I know sometimes, like, your family would discard you, your family would get rid of you, your religion, your church would excommunicate you if you get divorced, your friends and people will kick you out or not talk to you anymore. It's tough. I understand that, y'all. But don't, like I said, it's a tough decision, but it's okay to choose happiness. It's okay, you know what I mean, to take that necessary step.
Religion is masculine. This is why they tell you that God is a man, because masculine mind, it actually blocks you from your heart.
Christianity was 100% written by men for men. It's amazing when some Christian women are not able to connect the dots when they say all men wrote the Bible and they also write about men being closer to God, being above women. That is not a coincidence. That didn't just happen. If all men wrote the Bible, they're going to be writing it in favor of themselves. That is not a far-fetched thing to say. That's why I say things like equality and feminism don't go with Christianity. And a lot of Christian women get upset when I talk like this, and if that is the type of life you want to live below your husband, that's fine. I'm not saying you're not allowed to live that way. But I personally am not okay with being seen as a second-class citizen, as being less than. I'm also not okay with the kind of relationship that breeds, because I want a partner, somebody who makes decisions with me, not somebody who makes decisions for me. And I cannot begin to tell you the amount of times I've heard growing up, the man is the head of the household, he makes the decisions, he has the final say. I'm just the side character to his story. I'm just his sidekick. I'm not my own individual person with my own individual thoughts and decision making. They pretend like men are more logical, better leaders, better decision makers, and essentially say, you're a woman, know your place. Like I said, I know some people are okay with this, or they think they're okay with it. I think that a lot of women in this sphere have been convinced that this is what they want. But when I think of a relationship or a marriage, I want a partnership. Someone who is my partner, not my authoritative figure. My partner is not my parent. They aren't above me. They don't make decisions over me. They make decisions with me. And I think to pretend like they are above you and pretend like they are smarter, more logical, closer to God than you is doing yourself a disservice.
My wife is not gonna let me go home if I don't ask this question, because she can't ask it. She just wanted to know why women are not allowed to preach in the church, and if a woman feels that she has the gift of preaching, why isn't she allowed?
1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 12. I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. So, because the Bible says so. The Bible says so. And that's it. And that's it. The other thing is, well, what if a person feels like they have gifts to do that? No one gets to do everything they feel like they're gifted at. No one does. What if a man who has several wives feels like he's gifted to be a pastor? The Bible says he must be the husband of one wife, right? So just because you feel like you're gifted to do something that doesn't give you the right to overthrow biblical qualifications. So if the office is exclusively for men, and the Bible is very clear that women are not to teach or exercise authority over men, there's absolutely no room for women to be in that office or to exercise that authority in the church. And that's it.
There's a lot of reasons why I don't deal with religion. There's also a lot of reasons why I don't talk about why I don't deal with religion. One is because I'm not about to go back and forth with anybody's mama, daddy, grandma, about why I believe what they believe and why they believe what they believe. At the end of the day, it's a core value. But what I will tell you is this. I saw this post and someone asked this question. They said, why is it that people that are in the church seem to be more judgmental than people that are not in the church? Why do they seem so devilish? Why do they seem like they're so manipulative? Well, because they're being manipulated. Because they're being judged. like that's why, right? When you go into the church, what they tell you is, come here with open arms. It's almost like you're being love bombed. Oh, come here with open arms. We love you. You can get this unconditional love if you meet these conditions. like ain't that crazy? It's like, you can come here and you can be loved and you can have everything that you need and you will have abundance and you will have this if you follow these rules, right? And that is then replicated in everything that we see, right? It's okay, well, you can have the marriage, you can have the love, you can have this, right? But if it doesn't meet these particular standards, then that can't be considered love. Now, what happens is that we are people of human nature, right? So we're going to do what we see. The environments that we are in, we're going to recreate them in our own little worlds, in our own little ways. So when you have a person that is consistently being judged, every thought they have is being judged, not only by people outside of them, but also in their own heads because they have been indoctrinated. So now they are in this spot where, oh my gosh, like, I want to be loved. I want to be closer to God. I want to show God. I want to show him how much I love him. I want to show him by being obedient. I want to show him by doing these things. And you really are actually developing a fear. Right? Because the fear deep down under that is that if I don't do these things that God is telling me to do, then he's not going to love me. I'm not going to get into heaven. And so what happens is that you take that mindset and you bring it out into the world. It's simple, right? I'm going to go out into the world and then I'm going to see you doing something and, oh my gosh, you shouldn't do that because if you do that, you might end up in a bad spot and you don't want to end up in that spot. I know I ain't trying to be in a bad spot, so I don't want you to be in that bad spot. So now I'm going to judge you. And really the gag is that none of this is actually love, right? When you love somebody unconditionally, there is no ego. There is no, hey, you can't do that or I'm not going to love you, or hey, you can't do this. That's called ownership. Okay, that's called ownership. That's not what real love really is. So when people ask this question and they're surprised about why are people in the church so judgy, it is because they are doing the exact thing they were taught to do. They are doing the exact thing that is being done to them. So anytime that somebody tells me that they're surprised that somebody didn't accept them with love that's in the church, I'm really trying to figure out when were they accepted for who they were in the church? They weren't, right? They get this self-righteous behavior because the more you act a certain way, then the more you're accepted in that community. But let's be real about it. You still fighting your demons and you still doing your thing, but then you're going to still be shunned. So if they're shunned, then you're shunned. And it's just kind of a pattern. And it's really, really simple. We just got to open our eyes to it. So religion, we can definitely blame religion, but we also have to look at what the system of religion is rooted in. The system of religion, and I'm particularly talking about Christianity, Catholicism, like all of these modern day religions are rooted in patriarchy. They're rooted in colonialism. And even before we get into colonialism, patriarchy is the biggest thing that we have to consider, because when you're evaluating a system, you have to evaluate that system for not necessarily what it appears to be, but what is it rooted in? And that will give you the answers for everything that you see right or wrong with that system. Because we have rooted everything in patriarchy, in the idea that men are the destined leaders. And that has put us in a situation where the feminine has been seen as less than and not able to contribute to the overall picture of moving the world forward. And not only just has the feminine been demonized in the sense of women, but it has been demonized in how we hold it as human beings for both men and women, right? We all have feminine energy and we all have masculine energy, and both are necessary and need to be in balance to move things forward. But when you have women, and I have to speak to the Black women, right? Us as Black women have been put in situations where our femininity has made us so vulnerable that it's not safe. So now we believe that us being vulnerable, us receiving, us actually putting ourselves in a place where we are whole, right, and safe to be in our true nature is not safe for us. And men, because we have demonized femininity, don't know how to tap into their ability to be emotionally intelligent, their ability to lead with empathy and not lead with control. Because unfortunately, we see a lot of toxic uses of both femininity and masculinity in both men and women. And now we are at a spot where religion enforces these values. And because of that, we are continuously stuck, particularly if you are working with people that are so rooted in religion that they can't see past what the system of religion is rooted in.
There are two forms of leadership. The first, and by far the most effective, is leadership of consent of, and with the sympathy of the followers. Leadership with the consent of and the sympathy of the followers. The second is leadership by force, without the consent and sympathy of the followers. Then what they want to do, they want to force a woman into submission. They want to force women through brutality to follow them, right? That's why I asked them, what books on leadership have you read? Education, you keep going back. Yeah, because you need it, because y'all are sitting up here having unproductive conversations and you ain't got an ounce of leadership in you. And you don't even know where to start.
Do you know why God was giving him pronouns? Because a man made him up, baby. He was tired of seeing woman give birth and create, so he had to make up a story, baby. The first form of any deity was a woman, not a man. Men got jealous. Men wanted to create a system. Men were mad. They were like, all these women, they're bringing life onto the planet. They're giving birth. It's a miracle. I want to do something too. Let's form a secret society and create a religion. Because all the women are getting the attention. They're worshiping goddesses. They're giving birth. We need something. Let's create a male god. Like, oh, they bleed every month. Well, we're going to start using blood too. Let's make up a story about somebody getting the blood. Let's sacrifice some blood. You're going to drink this every month too. We can't bleed down there, so just find some blood somewhere. Like, cut your hand or something. That's literally how it went down. They was mad, so they wanted to join in, so they had to fake it till they never made it. They have to fake it. It's like fake. It's like the fake version of what women naturally are. That's all religion is. It's just a fake, synthetic version of what women are. And the funny thing is, I'm going to tell y'all, even the religious leaders who represent the actual religion have already figured it out. And they're just profiting off of it at this point. They already know it's a spiritual metaphor. It's this, it's that, it's meant to control. They already know once they get higher up, especially if nobody told them, they figured it out. But they're just going to collect the benefits from it. They're going to collect the money from it. They're going to collect the power from it. Because now they know something that the other people don't know. And so they'll just continue to represent it on a higher level in order to collect the benefits from it. But they don't really believe in this stuff, literally. Okay, because I've actually talked to a lot of high up religious people, and they don't believe in none of that stuff. They just, they'll say, I know. It's all metaphor. It's all symbolism. It's literally the same thing. I know. But they don't.
People bash religion, and I never got into that because of one thing. A lot of religion and rules, I know people like, oh, the rules are stupid, the rules are this. The rules is keeping some people from turning into wild, sheer animals and causing so much trouble roaming this earth. And that's just the facts. The rules is keeping a lot of folks and a lot of us in check, because without any rules, without any kind of standards, this out here would be like land of the dead. This would be like zombie land out here.
Sexless young men, typically throughout history, throughout time, have been the group to worry about. So strongly associated with violence, that we call it the young male syndrome in our field, that this has always been a huge problem. Now, throughout history, you had kind of cultural or social institutions to deal with your population of incels. So, for example, the monastery would be one for sure, give a high status position to kind of channel these extra guys into. You'd create Vikings out of them. The Vikings were likely incels, not the sexy kind of Netflix Vikings that you think from the TV shows. The Portuguese explorers, there's strong evidence that they were incels, basically, sent on purpose missions to kind of basically get away from causing trouble for everyone else.
I mean, can you define them as incels when sexual violence was a part of that conquest?
Right. So that's also a good point, that the motivation of acquiring mates has been a motivating factor for a lot of men to join terrorist groups. Even jihadi violence, it's the promise of brides in this life or the next. And when you talk to anthropologists who, there's one, Napoleon Chagnon, and he did some research with the Yanomamo, who are an extremely violent hunter-gatherer society in Bolivia. And he told them about why people in the West go to war, to spread democracy, free speech, things like this. And they were just falling off their chair laughing. They were like, what? Why would you? And he said, well, why do you go to war? And they were like, only one reason, to get mates.
Does anyone else ever think about how women weren't even allowed to have bank accounts or credit cards before 1974? Like, that is when the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed. Prior to that, women needed a man to act as a cosigner for them to get a loan or credit. They could also use women's marital status and pregnancy status against them in the employment process. So before this bill was passed, women actually needed a man, so like a husband, a father, a brother, to be a cosigner for them if they wanted a bank account, credit, or a loan. If a woman was married, she was actually legally required to ensure that her husband knew about her bank accounts or credit, etc. And they could use factors like a woman's potential to get pregnant against her when deciding if she was creditworthy. They assumed that once she got married, she was going to get pregnant, and so that was going to mean that her income was going to be less consistent. And in many cases, a woman's wages were actually considered her husband's property. And I again want to reiterate that this was 50 years ago. This was in 1974 that this started to change. So when we hear this discourse about how people used to value marriage and stay in their marriages longer, just remember that it wasn't necessarily that women were happier, that they didn't want to leave. It was that they literally couldn't.
In all social anthropology, men are busy trying to control other men, right? So the first laws are about incest. Do not screw your mother, okay? Do not screw your daughters. Do not screw your sisters. The laws are not really sisters stop screwing your brothers, okay? And moms stop screwing. It's not that way round. So the origin of law, when you look at it from a social anthropology point of view, it's men controlling men because we know we're out of control, right? We're just out of control. So the origin of law is about contracts between men. Now, women have come along and got wrapped up in that, and that's a different thing. But initially, the problem was never, how do we control women? It's like, how the hell do we control men? Okay, they're out of control. The young generations don't listen to the older ones. There are disputes over sexual jealousy between men. Okay, so we need to figure out the men. So that's 101 social anthropology. Freud comes along, and in Totem and Taboo, which was in 1913, he writes a book and says, okay, I'm going to have a look at the psychology of this, right? And he comes up with a bunch of ideas. And what he says is, men are clearly a problem. And he tries to look at the relationship between young men and their fathers. Okay? And he's saying, this is where I want to locate the psychological problem. There's something wrong with young men and their fathers. And there's something about young men that can't handle the fathers, and there's something about the fathers that can't handle the young men. So the fathers try to control the young men in the tribe or the village or whatever, okay? The young men resent it, so they want to kill the father. So laws are psychologically coming about because young men and old men are basically in a life and death struggle. Now, feminism came along and said, oh, Freud's talking rubbish because he doesn't involve women. And that's correct. He doesn't involve women, right? Because women are not the problem. Exactly. The problem is with men. What did he say about men, right? He's saying they are seriously out of control. sexually and in terms of aggression. And that's why they need laws. And we have this constant fight between the older men and the younger men. And that's a psychological problem right off the bat, just there, on the level of social anthropology. Okay,
That's interesting. My question to you is, after analyzing men, what do you think the likelihood is of men actually becoming consciously aware of their own behavior and noticing that it's a problem? Because we have a lot of men on the planet.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned Carl Jung. Okay, now Jung had a different take to Freud. Okay, he's saying, I can't believe that this is just biological. I can't believe this is just sexual. So he comes up with this idea about archetypes. Okay, there are blueprints in the universe, okay, psychically, of male and female contrasexual archetypes, okay, that live in all of us, okay. But if you're a man, you're going to have a male archetype as the dominant, okay, and you're going to look for the feminine archetype. And women are going to look for the male archetype, all right? So Jung is working at that level. Now, in the Jungian model, change is only going to come when that archetype gets so negative, creates so much pain, that it throws the male psyche into crisis. And that's what you're seeing now, is that men are having to face an unprecedented crisis, which I think a lot of your viewers already know. So it's a situation where women are more intelligent, they're performing better in educational circles, they are starting to get jobs, even though there are issues with gender diversity and pay gap and so on, okay? But they are making progress. They're getting financial economic independence, so they don't have to put up with men anymore, okay? So when did this happen? So there is a massive shift in the collective psyche that's going on societally, and it has come about, that's one of the benefits of capitalism, is that if you have the cash as a woman, you don't have to put up with a man. And that's what's hurting the men a lot, okay? And that, I think, is what the Andrew Tate stuff and the whole men's movement trying to rally around that is trying, it's a defensive move, okay? It's like, whoa, we're losing our power, we don't have the social structures anymore. These women are becoming too independent, God damn the feminists. So now we have to mobilize. But they can't mobilize because this is a historical force that's too big for them.
They had to literally make laws because these men out here chasing behind some animals. So let that sink in once the next time you seek validation from men. They literally had to go and make laws, write laws, have people sign it, get it stamped, get it voted on because of these types of men out here. And y'all seeking their validation when they had to make laws to protect the animals' booties? Sprinkle, sprinkle.
I love coffee. Da, 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 da. You know when they hear people say, men would fuck anything that moves? Well, apparently they'll fuck anything that doesn't move too. Time for another coffee.
Yeah, I don't get it. You're talking about Strykor, but he's not here.
The legitimate truth is because of necrophilia. Unfortunately, in history, men are known to do bad things to their bodies because it's easier to do it without consent. And there was a less likely chance for women to do it. And this is based off a lot of things. One of those things being that when they had to send the body back for a second autopsy, they found the mortician left something behind. Men thought it was easier to get away with because they were going into the ground anyway. Thankfully, protocols have been strengthened and DNA testing has become more profound. You can't get away with it on the autopsy table, you can't get away with it with the living. It's illegal regardless, strictly because men display that they can't control themselves when they see a lifeless female body. If you don't believe me, look it up.
Hey y'all, so as y'all know, this is Marilyn Monroe, one of the first curvy, thick models that made it really big. And let's talk about her life real quick. So she was first essayed when she was 8 years old by her caretaker. So she was in a foster home. Her mom could not take care of her due to mental illness, and her dad left before she was born, right? So when she got to a certain age, she got famous, and she thought she was out of the danger zone. Well, it turns out she started to date all of the wrong people. They were not great relationships, and she started getting abused at Hollywood parties. So she was held down and made do things that she didn't want to do, right? So when she passed away and her body went missing for 6+ hours, right? And there was tales that she was post-mortem S8, if you guys know what that means. The tales said that more than 6 people slept with her at that time, and she was passed around. There was a lot of crazy tales that were going around, but if you Google it, you will be able to find more details on Marilyn Monroe.
Did you hear what happened to Marilyn Monroe after she died? It's disgusting. No, I didn't. What happened?
What the fuck? See this right here? Pythagoras. As soon as laws are necessary for men, they are no longer fit for freedom. As soon as laws are necessary for men, they are no longer fit for freedom. They should have never gave you freedom. You don't know how to handle it. Now that comes from Pythagoras. You got to be responsible. They think being responsible is the government making them do something. The only reason that the government got to put laws on you is because you cannot govern and control your own damn behavior. You need the government to control you. You need the woman to control you. You need everybody to do things for you because you won't do it for yourself. We will continue on with the deterioration of the soul. The male again was bred by a higher intelligent force to take over planet Earth. He was used as a weapon, and then he was indoctrinated with the ideals that he was made in the image of God. So these males who were bred do not have the ability to reason. They do not have the ability to control their behavior. They are the real don't know no better people. And they were never meant to be at this level because women occupied the planet, right? And they had a healthy amount of males that they controlled, right? How the male has gotten out, he is disgusted at himself that he can't control his behavior. Men are not the creators of their brain. It's not their fault that visual processing, right? That their visual processing unit operates that way. But the people who bred them and made them victims of the system and used them as weapons to do exactly what you're saying. So the male who is crying out for help because he can't help and he don't know because he's not the creator of patriarchy. He's a victim of it. So he is just a part of this destruction as the female, and nobody knows how to stop it because they ain't figured out that it's the people at the top that intentionally bred the male at this capacity, and the male operates at his lowest nature, and he can't stop it. Even if he wants to, he can't. And so a lot of these dudes are crying out for help and they don't know how to behave. So unfortunately, there's going to be casualties of war because that's what we're under. It was a war on planet Earth. And guess what? Women were the natural resource to planet Earth. So all I'm saying is when you see these males struggling and they're angry, they didn't bring themselves here. The people at the top enslaved women and forced them to be baby making machines to produce these males to be weapons against them. And so this is why the male blames women, because the male has an internal compass that he knows that the woman is God, and they depend on you as women to govern their behavior. But because women have been indoctrinated with these patriarchal philosophies supporting males, they have bred them unconsciously. So the male is now resentful towards women because he lives a hellish existence. It's not the woman's fault and it's not the male's fault. It's the people at the top who did this shit. So I have compassion for everybody in this system because the male is suffering, even if you don't think he is, because his behavior is impacting women and children. It's the internal turmoil that the people at the top intentionally produced and made these dudes soulless, and they don't know how to get out. Male is suffering even if you don't think he is, because his behavior is impacting women and children. It's the internal turmoil that the people at the top intentionally produced and made these dudes soulless, and they don't know how to get out of it. They don't have the brain capabilities to control their behavior. They don't have access to that feminine space without being connected to a woman, and they've been programmed to hate the woman. And because women brought them here, and they don't have the ability to rationalize or see beyond two-dimensional thinking, the male cannot see that the males that they worship and follow are the cause of his pain. He can't see that. So he thinks the woman is the problem, and he can't see that the woman was enslaved. But at the same time, he needs to get his needs met. So it's a real fucked up situation.
Stop men being misogynistic and conducting the hate crimes that they do. But it is a psychological problem, Chrissy, and it is a mental health issue. And once again, because the pharmaceutical industry don't have a drug that can cure us of misogyny, it doesn't appear anywhere in psychiatric manuals. But it is a disorder because it is a state of mind, specifically in the male brain, that feels a need to terrorize women, to humiliate women, because actually, when you strip away all the machismo of the male persona, when you strip away all this bravado and posturing that men do, they are very scared brains inside the male's skull. And this is something that needs to be understood without trying to shame men, by the way. This is not an occasion to simply attack men. What we need to do is try and ask ourselves, where is the problem of misogyny located? And it is clearly not in the law, it is clearly not in culture, it is somewhere in the human brain.
Now, that's what I focus on, ain't it? I keep telling you that this is based in their brain. The male brain's wiring. And I told you that males are here to consume women, and it is something in their brain that makes them disrespect women, that makes them not listen to women. It's something in their brain that cuts it off. I told you this, and I've been saying it. But I guess it takes a psychotherapist and a male, even though I pulled up as many research papers to back up and pulled out as much logic as I could pull up. I guess you just need somebody else that's in the male body to tell you.
this need from men to attack women in this way, which indicates that actually the fundamental root of this is men are terrified by women.
Didn't I tell you it ain't no such thing as misandry? Haven't I told you that there's no such thing as misandry? That when you strip it all down, misandry is nothing more than men's projected self-hate onto women? Because when the truth, men depend on women lying. They depend on fairy tales because the truth does not support male existence. So when a woman who he depends on for all of his resources, for his life sustenance, when she puts the truth in front of him, he sees himself and he hates himself. He hates himself because the male operates in a perpetual state of scarcity. And he is not a whole being, but the woman is. Right? So instead of him admitting that he hates himself, he say, you hate men, when it's really self-hatred. Ain't no such thing as misandry.
So they are emasculated, are they, by women? That's what we do to them.
It isn't what women do to men. It is something more fundamental than that, Chrissy. So around 15 years ago, I went to a seminar up in London at a Lacanian centre. And somebody called Jean-Jacques Bernstein from Paris came over. And he was talking about Lacan's idea from Freud that men think of themselves through their genitals, okay, which is the penis and the phallus. And so men...
Hence, where phallic worship come from, right? Hence phallic worship, because this is all the male thinks through, which I kept telling y'all that too, right? So you're dealing with somebody that is so devolved, and for some reason, y'all really think that these dudes are human. And I keep telling you that they are human forms of AI, like they are the original AI, that they are devolved. And for some reason, you think the devolved male is capable of such a high-level concept such as love. The male is so devolved, but you think that the male is capable of a complex, abstract concept called love. Dodo bird. Boo-boo the fool.
Actually think like that. And Bernstein made this incredible comment, and he said, that's why men are dicks. Okay? Now, I took that away as something way more profound than men being dicks. What it told me was that women can give birth to children. Men will never do that. Women have a relationship with the earth and with cooking in their stereotypes. Men rarely do. Men don't have a fundamental relationship with life.
I told you that too. That women are, they have a connection to earth, the moon, and the cosmos. Women are nature's resource. Women are the fruit of life. And I told you that men are consumers and women are producers, and males came here to consume all of planet Earth's resources, and they copy themselves like a virus. And I told you that the feminine is life. And I told you that straight lines represent the masculine, and two straight lines, when you cross it, guess what? That's a symbol of death. That's a symbol of death. That's why it says, cross my heart and hope to die. Stick a needle in my eye. This is a symbol of death. This is what you worship in Christianity, right? This is a symbol of death, not life. Worshiping the masculine is worshiping death, because males do not have a relationship to life. But you swear they capable of love, though. You swear they capable of it. You have no earthly idea what you're talking about.
They have short, shriveled phalluses for most of the time. They can't experience sexual pleasure like women can. They are inferior. They can't give birth to a child. They don't know what giving birth to life means. Men, psychologically and biologically, do not have a relationship with life. That's why they are terrified of women. It's not about emasculation. It's about the fundamental biological, psychological makeup of men. They are terrified. They are inferior species.
Who got something to say? Who got something else to say? Right? Because I could have swore this is what I've been saying for the last year and a half. For the last year and a half, I've been saying this. So it takes a male psychotherapist to parrot the same thing that this black woman been sitting up here telling you? Don't listen to a woman with no man. Alright, don't listen to me then. Listen to him then. Since you don't want to listen to me, listen to him.
The thing is, there are lots of grades of misogyny, it seems to me, and we will look in a minute at what happens in the case of which are truly terrible in society, and I think everybody agrees. But on a lesser level, you know, I think having worked in an industry where it was perfectly normal to go around pinching a girl's bottom or make comments about how she looked or grope her. And I do remember an occasion when I was reading the news on radio, and there was a panel between us, a glass panel, and the man dropped his trousers, and just to see if I'd go on reading the news. Did I go and complain? Did I take them to a tribunal? No, because I needed the job. So are we not making all too much fuss of the slightly lesser grades of misogyny?
The microaggressions that you're talking about are quite tragic, and it's actually quite painful to hear you saying, I needed a job. Okay, that's hideous that women have to put up with this kind of behaviour, not just because they need a job, but actually because society tells them, oh, this is so funny, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, let's reverse the situation. If men found that foul, repulsive women came up to them and pinched their bottoms and made leering comments and groped inside their trousers, do you honestly think, Chrissy, that men are going to sit there and go, this is so funny, I won't complain, I just need to do that for my job? No, men would probably physically slap the woman back. They would...
Hi, ladies. Don't know if y'all realize, I know you do, but you just stuck for not for some reason. I know why you're stuck. There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of trauma. But you know who caused that trauma? The same motherfuckers you asking to fix you. They cannot fix you. How could you chase a man? They're chasers. They're chasers, which is why you never truly catch them. Because while you chasing them and you think you've caught them, they're busy chasing other things. All the while, the things that you were supposed to be nurturing and mothering and all that stuff, you leave all that shit and neglect it. Because you were chasing a motherfucker that don't ever stay still. Ding, ding, ding. But you know this. You know this. If aliens came down to this motherfucker right now, like they had visited thousands and thousands of years ago, and they came back now, they'd be devastated. Like, oh my God, what happened to this place? It was beautiful. Well, see, here's the thing. I've been here monitoring, and there's this thing where there's two counterparts. There's the men and the women, right? Yeah, I remember that. Okay, so yeah, so the men decided that it was their right to rule, but that's stupid because there's supposed to be a balance and a dance, right? We don't know how that got started. I only got back and, you know, they had already done all the damage that they had done. Okay, so then, yeah, men decided they were to rule and they subjugated women. Well, that makes sense to me because I just see destruction. I don't see a lot of growth, a lot of organic resonance or anything. Like mothering is really what I'm after. Yeah, so yeah, that makes sense that men have been in charge. So then I have a question. If you've been here monitoring, like, do the women not know that that's what's happening? No, they know. They do? They know. So why aren't they doing anything? So here's this thing. They have a thing here called trauma that is actually quite debilitating for them. Okay, so then the women have this thing called trauma? Yeah, so where did they get it? From the men. But that's just more evidence that the men shouldn't be ruling. It is.
But remember that the trauma is debilitating. So there's no way past the trauma. Oh no, there's way through the trauma. So they can get through the trauma that the men have caused them. But they not right. But they can see that that men, the balance is off, and that with men in the lead of everything, that it's destruction. Yes. That's where the trauma comes from. All of the destruction, because men have no one checks the men, right? There's no balance. The dance is off. So everybody knows this, but nobody wants to do anything about it, right? Okay, so what are the men doing? Well, the men, have been in this power for so long. They're off too, because they were never meant to have power like this. And they know they're never meant to have power like this. And they themselves see the result. But because they have been outside of the amount of power that they were supposed to have, they think it's powerful to destroy. I know, aghast. So the women just let them? Yes. It's not just, even though, here's why things are so far off balance. It is not simply that the women let them. Okay, so what? No, the women, promote it. I'm sorry. What? Yes, the women promote it. How? What do you mean promote? What do you mean promote? Well, see, the women, remember I was telling you that the trauma is debilitating? Well, it really screws up a lot of circuits that they have. Okay, so they know that men being in power the way they have is the reason that everything looks this way, including why they have so much trauma. But they're afraid to deal with the trauma. So they're willing to destroy all life on Earth? Yes. Yes. Not to deal with the trauma? I'm so glad I don't have this trauma thing. Yeah, just be glad that we can sit up here and observe. It is, well, you know what? I think what we kind of are feeling about the destruction of this place, they would call trauma. I think that's something similar to trauma. We may not feel as deeply because we're not down there. There's a lot of intricacies about trauma and the destruction that they're seeing. But I think that's what we're experiencing sitting up here, looking at the destruction these two have caused. Okay, so then what's the solution? Well, women would have to step into their power. Okay, so then how do we get them to do that? We can't get them to do anything. They have to do it on their own. And they're not. So then we just sit here and watch? Yeah, no intervention. So we have to sit here and watch this beautiful place that sent out beautiful organic resonance to the rest of the dimension. We have to sit here and watch these two destroy? Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of them down there that have figured it out. Okay, so are they spreading the message? They are. And are people picking up on the message? No, they just double down. What do you mean double down? So when they get any outside information that says that men aren't supposed to have all this power, and that women are not stepping into their power, and whenever somebody comes along with that, the person that said it gets ostracized, they get pressed down. Who's pressing them down, the men or the women? Both. They're both doing it? So they like this then. Seems to be that way. Wait, you gotta be fucking with me. You gotta be fucking with me. It's so obvious that this is so destructive. The men and the women like things being this way? I mean, if they didn't like it, they would change it, right? Fuck, you got a point. You got a fucking point there. So then we just sit here and watch. They have offspring, don't they? They do. What is happening to the offspring? Trauma. And they're cool with that? Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of trauma on this planet in general. The place is kind of wild. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty... they have this word called civilized. It's kind of uncivilized. You might not know what that is. It's just natural. But yeah, so yeah, no, it's actually kind of brutish down there. Yeah. Well, damn. Well, do you mind if I sit with you and watch? Because I'm afraid that if I leave and come back, there will be nothing here. Yeah, I wouldn't mind the company. I'm going to be honest with you. If you sit here and watch, you are going to have trauma. And trauma, you can get through it, but it doesn't really go away. Is this going to make me debilitated? It doesn't have to. Everything around you is screaming, mom, mom, mom. What the fuck, man? Dudes are not supposed to be in charge. This is what we got with dudes in charge. How are you chasing a chaser? Everything around you is screaming mom. The earth herself is calling mothers. Because guess what? She knows that there is no fucking sense in calling fathers, because fathers are well the fuck out of balance. And if she calls fathers, they're coming to cut down her fucking trees. Coming to rip her fucking skin. That's why she's calling mothers. Because she knows until mothers step forward into their protection, we're the protectors of life. Men want to protect their property, but you're cool being property. You want to be property. The mother is calling your children. Like the entire fucking human race is saying, mom, 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 mom. Like, what the fuck else do you need to see? Y'all are literally, like, they're literally the reason you have trauma. But you're going to prostrate yourself to them more? The world looks this way because men are not in their energy. They are not living in their true energy. And women, for fuck sure, ain't living in our true fucking energy. We're not slaves. But that's what they got you acting like. Slaves that sound intellectual. Meanwhile, while you chasing the chaser, who's always chasing something else other than you, because you're not supposed to be chasing, duh. Fucking duh by now. But while you're chasing the one that always chases something else, you left everything that we needed for life vulnerable. And guess who snuck in the back way? The fucking chasers. So you, chasing a chaser, you left everything good and wholesome to chase the chaser who's chasing other things. And little did you know that chaser was coming right behind you when you left the vulnerable things and fucking them up. Because you were supposed to stay your ass there with life. But you chasing a fucking chaser. Get your shit together.
I want to name something that I think is happening right now energetically and structurally. For hundreds of years, a lot of systems depended on women being compliant through niceness, agreeableness, emotional labor, self-suppression. We were expected to regulate everyone else emotionally, hold relationships together, soften conflict, reproduce automatically, and follow roles instead of truth. And that wasn't just cultural norms. That's an entire energy supply. What's changing is not that women are taking something away from the world. What's changing is that women are starting to treat themselves as full human beings. And when you do that, you stop holding together structures that only work if you stay fragmented. So we're effectively removing a large energy supply. So yes, things feel unstable because a hidden support beam is being removed, and you can't remove a load-bearing beam and expect the building to stay straight and feel calm. But this is not about the collapse because women are selfish. It's about exposure. Systems that relied on unpaid emotional labor, automatic compliance, and assumed sacrifice were never coherent to begin with. They were subsidized. Once you feel what it's like to make decisions based on truth instead of your role, your body can't unlearn that, and your nervous system won't agree to go back. Women becoming more whole is destabilizing a world that depended on us staying small. And that doesn't mean that something is wrong. As a matter of fact, it means something that never actually worked is finally being asked to stand on its own or crumble. And if you're paying any attention at all, you see that it's the latter. It's crumbling. So keep your signal clear and strong.
tonight, but she died by 10. Someone